All right, folks, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It's Brian Driscoll, it's Vince D'Addario. We're here, we're fired up, we're ready to go. We're talking X Factors, folks, and we're talking X Factors by player X Factors that are actually going to be on the field making the plays. Okay, so we may have, I don't know, a coaching X Factor maybe in the future. I don't know. That's a possibility. But today it's about the players. We're going to do some offense. We're going to do some defense. We're going to compare lists. And so just a little peek behind the curtain. I like to do this, a little peek behind the curtain. I gave my list to Brian, and then he told me his list. So that's kind of how we do it. So we don't collaborate on the list. We come up with our own, and then we see where we kind of overlapped and things like that. So the conspiracy theorists out there who think I just always agree with Brian's lists, it's not accurate. Just so happens there's some carryover.
It's such a lame take that I get from people too. Well, maybe he doesn't disagree with me because he agrees with me. He actually agrees.
Because we're right. I mean,
so
that's
on the offensive list today, for example, 3 of the 4 we were on the same page on.
Yep.
And then 2 of the 4 on defense were on the same page on. And so we'll kind of talk about the ones we agree on, and then we'll both kind of mention the other 2 that the other 3 on both sides we don't do.
Yep.
And then we'll also, Vince, today afterwards, we're going to do our Big Ten preview. So we're going to start our conference previews. We're going to do some here at IB Nation or Irish Breakdown. We'll do others on CFP Nation. But so that's going to be the second part of what we're going to do. So we're going to
be dialed in,
make our East and West predictions. We'll go 1 through 7. We'll kind of talk about the title, the division contenders. Just dive into those. We won't do like all 14 teams. Talk a little bit about what could be the things that keep those teams from winning the conference, and then we'll say, hey, here's who the champ is going to be, and whether or not that champ will make the college football playoff. So we're going to have some fun today, man.
Yeah, we are going to have some fun, and then of course after we're all done with that, we're going to have our mailbag. So if you do have mailbag questions, you can go ahead and get them in. Put MB in front of the little mailbox emoji. That's cool. That way we can do that.
Yeah. So and sign up for the message board, folks.
Oh, that's right. We're only 10 away, 10 away from our preseason goal, right?
I'll be honest with you all about where we're at. Okay. So we keep hinting. So here's what happened. We launched the message board in July of 2021, right? And so we set goals, right? I mean, Vince, you know me. I'm a very goal-driven guy. I want to have something to work towards, right? And so the first goal was to have 500 people by that football season. And we did. And then essentially it was basically our next goal was to get to 1,000 by the time we got to the 2022 season. And then the next goal was to get to 2,000 by the 2023 season, then basically 1,000 forward. And so we're actually on the verge of 3,000 right now. So we've already, we met like our goal for our actual 2023 goal, we met before last year, before last season. So the goal we're trying to get to now is I want to stay a year ahead of what our projection was or what our goals were. And so we're about 10 away. We're about 10 away is where we're at of total subscribers. That includes gold, blue, shamrock, annual, and monthly. And technically we're over 3,000 already, but I removed all the people that have paid for using PayPal. I actually removed them from our official number because they won't renew. They can't renew because we don't use PayPal anymore. And a lot of those are still active. I mean, probably still have another 100, 150 active PayPal people whose memberships are going to expire over the next few months.
Oh,
interesting. So I don't count them because they're not going to renew. They're going to have to make the choice to sign back up. And I'd say probably 90% of the ones that kind of had to renew manually have done so, which is pretty cool. So it's allowed us to quickly recover because that's what I thought we were going to be too far behind when we did the PayPal thing. We stopped using PayPal. That took away about 500 from our number.
Wow.
And we've already gone way past it. I mean, that got us, we were at like 2,700 when we made that decision, almost 28. That got us down to 23. That was in December. And we're already, almost at 3,000. So it's been awesome. It's been awesome. We've got a lot of cool stuff on there. So if you haven't done so already,
sign up
for the message boards. And we got a couple cool things we're going to do. So right now we're working on the donation page. But another thing we're going to do, and I'm going to meet with Angela today because, as y'all know, my wife is the one that actually designed our message board, and her company actually handles a lot of the most of the changes and such. But one of the things we're going to do is we're going to start a referral program here, hopefully before the season starts, where if you refer your friends to Irish Breakdown, they sign up, they put your name in there. And then for every X number of people that sign up, that you put your name in the promo code, you'll get some free merch and some free gear and some cool stuff like that. So we're going to start that part as well. So it'll be a lot of fun. So, awesome. That's not the main topic for today, Vince.
It is not today the main topic, and we're going to jump right into it. X factors, baby. X factors to this team, and we had a definition. I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page here. So the definition that we're using for X factor is a variable in a given situation that could have the most significant impact on the outcome. But there are some caveats in that we're not taking the guys that we know. Right.
So Joe Walt needs to keep playing like an All-American.
Correct. Right? Like Sam Hartman, Audric Estime, like those are known commodities. Like we know what we're going to get out of those guys, right?
They just have to keep doing what they're doing.
Right. So they're not on the list. Okay. These are guys that if they perform and they do some of the things that we think they're going to do, they are going to be catalysts for what the offense or the defense is going to do. So just so you guys are on the same page with how we're going to go about it, that's how we made our lists.
And as you mentioned, Vince, it's players only.
Players only.
There's plenty of other X factors, injuries, coaching, all types of things. We'll touch on a lot of those things in different formats down the road before the season starts. But this is about the players and the production. That's what this really boils down to.
Yep. So let's start with offense, Brian, because I don't know, I like starting with offense. And it's the first list that we talked about. And we had, again, full transparency, we were going to do 3 to 4 guys. We both did 4, and 3 were the same. So we're going to talk about those 3 first. Okay. So the number 1 guy out of the chute doesn't mean it's the number 1 X factor or anything like that, but he is the first guy that came to mind for me. I don't want to speak for you. It's Chris Tyree. And we all know that Chris Tyree has moved positions. Somebody in the chat yesterday said, we were talking, I forget what we were even talking about, but they were talking about Chris Tyree, we were talking about running backs getting drafted. It's like, how many from the current room do we think are going to get drafted? And they're like, well, you can throw Chris Tyree in, as well. And it's like, no, he's not a running back anymore. And they called him like a pseudo wide receiver, a pseudo running or something along those lines. Like, no, he's just a wide receiver. Like he is a wide receiver in this offense, and he's taken to the job pretty well. And he's put the work in. Don't get me wrong. He has put the work in to make sure that he is going to be at the best of his ability once the season starts. But I've been really, really excited with what we've seen with our own 2 eyes at practice and how he's gotten to where he is right now. Still room to improve, but he's 100% an X factor for this offense, because if he can become who we think he can become, this offense is going to take another big step.
And let's define what the X factor aspect for Chris Tyree is. It does not mean he has to have 70 catches for 1,300 yards. He doesn't have to be Devontae Smith. That's not really what we're looking for. I would love to see him get around 1,000 yards of offense, rushing and receiving. And if he gets anywhere close to that, it's exactly what we're looking for. But really what it boils down to is they have to, as a staff, have to find ways to get him the football.
Right.
And then he has to, number 1, stay healthy, which has been a little bit of an issue for Chris during his career. Not that he's missed games, but he just gets banged up. And when he's banged up, he hasn't been as good. Well, it should be a little easier for him to be able to still play better when he's outside than when you're banged up on the inside and you're a 5'9", 190-pound running back. So obviously the staff is going to have to find ways to give him the ball. He's got to still continue developing as a wide receiver, though. That's going to be the big thing, right, Vince, is catching the football, being able to do more than just screens and slants and crossers, right? He's going to have to catch the ball down the field. He's going to have to work the middle of the field.
Absolutely.
All those things are going to be important, and he just has to be a threat. He doesn't have to be a 100-yard-per-game guy. He has to be a threat. Now, if I'm the Notre Dame coaching staff, the first thing I'm doing my first couple games is I'm getting Chris Tyree established.
You got it.
And the reason I say that is number 1, I'm most concerned about my football team.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at my football team, I need Chris Tyree confident. I need him to know the frustration you've had the last couple of years about not being made an important enough piece. We're not going to make that mistake. You're a part of this. So it's about building up his confidence in you and even more importantly, in himself. That, hey, you can do this. I would probably do some things that are going to be a little bit easier for him initially. I'm not like first play of the game throwing the ball 80 yards down the field to him. You know what I mean? Like I want to give him some stuff to get comfortable.
Give him the rocket treatment.
But I am going to try to get him. I am going to try to get him the ball down the field.
Yeah.
At times as well. But I'm going to get him some reverses and some jets and some screens and some crossers and some slants on top of obviously some of the more traditional receiver stuff. And that's something I'm doing early on. And so that's a good thing for Chris Tyree. It helps him and Sam Hartman continue building that relationship, because it's one thing to have it in practice. It's another thing to have it in games. And the other part too, Vince, is a lot of people kind of get into this. Well, I'm saving this for such and such. Screw that. I'm not saving anything. I want Ohio State feeling like they have a million things to prepare for.
Absolutely.
For us. And that's just
kind of 5. Like
exactly. You got to beat NC State first.
4 games. Like that's nuts.
And I'm not waiting to make Chris Tyree a factor until we go on the road to NC State. I'm just not waiting that long. I'm going to do it right away.
Yeah.
Because here's also that's part of the X factor. So he brings home run speed to the offense. We all know that. It's, can the home run speed translate into consistent production? I mean, we all remember the 90-plus yard rush he had as a freshman against Syracuse, right? We all remember the 96-yard touchdown return that completely changed the game against Wisconsin in 2021. We remember what he did in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State, where he had 100 yards receiving. So that's the funny thing is, I believe he's the only receiver on the roster right now that has a 100-yard game under his belt. Wow. I don't think that Jaden Thomas might, because I know Jaden had a big game against Navy last year, but I don't think he had 100 yards in that game. Let me just look that up real quick. Yeah, he did not. He had 80 yards. So right now, the only guy on the roster that has a 100-yard receiving game is Chris Tyree. He also had a 55-yard catch and run for a touchdown against, if you remember, against Toledo in 2021 as well, Vince. So this is a kid who's shown he can be a home run threat.
Right.
If you remember his freshman year, that 40-plus yard touchdown run he had against Florida State for on a counter play to the left. So he's shown that ability, but can he do it consistently? Can he do it as a receiver? Those are all questions. But if he does, you get that home run ability.
Sure.
And what does that do? Oh, of course, it gives you a home run hitter. You call a little screen pass. He finds a little crease. You block your butts off on the perimeter, and he takes it, and he's gone. Something like that. We saw some of the stuff that Braden Lindsey did in 2019. I thought Chip Long late in 2019 did a great job of finding different ways to get Braden Lindsey the ball. Do you remember the first time they really gave Braden Lindsey the football in a real game setting? Like, you remember he caught the deep pass against New Mexico, but the first time he was actually like with the first team offense, they ran a reverse against USC, goes 50 yards for a touchdown.
To say it was USC.
Then he had a 60-yard jet sweep against Boston College. And so you start seeing him kind of get involved. That's kind of the blueprint for me. That late year, what we saw from Braden Lindsey, had 200-plus receiving yards, 200-plus rushing yards. I want to see that from Chris Tyree over the course of an entire season. Then the factor there, Vince, is he then has an impact on Tobias Merriweather and Jaden Thomas and the tight ends and the run game and all those type of things. And if you want to load the box up, and you better hope your nickel or your linebacker doesn't get beat on a slant route by Chris Tyree, because if you're going zero pressure against us and Chris Tyree wins off the line and catches a slant or a glance, it's gone. He's gone. You can't run with him.
Yep.
And so if he is a legitimate factor in this offense, and it doesn't have to be 10 touches a game, right? That's the beauty of Chris Tyree's skill set is he can do a lot with 5 touches if it's the right 5 touches. And so now you have to change how you're covering Notre Dame. Well, I don't know if we can double team Jaden Thomas or Tobias Merriweather or Mitchell Evans or Holden Stace, or if we can put 8 guys in the box all game against this team, because if you get caught peeking in the backfield and Notre Dame runs a post wheel concept and your slot has to open up and run as he's peeking inside first, he's not catching Chris Tyree. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And so it just changes how you defend teams. So that's why he's number one, my biggest X factor on offense, Vince, because more than any other player on offense, him playing to what we hope he can be has a greater impact on more people in the offense and what the defense has to do, in my opinion, than Tobias, than the tight ends, than Audric, than Sam Hartman, than anybody, because of that speed. And that's why he's my number one guy.
And you've got a great opportunity the first couple of games to really make him feel comfortable in the offense. Because look, let's be honest, he hasn't been a straight up wide receiver in a game. I mean, yes, in jersey scrimmages and practice and all that, and that's great. And he's doing a good job with what he's being asked to do at the moment. But he still hasn't done it against a different colored helmet. And so, Notre Dame needs to see what he can do when the lights are on. And you've got a great opportunity the first few games to get him real comfortable in the offense. And like you said, moving him around, doing some different things, running your base stuff, the stuff that you've been running in practice that he seems to me to be very comfortable doing, and that Sam Hartman feels very comfortable getting him the football doing. That's what you need to do in the first few games. Just get him comfortable. You get him comfortable in those first two, sky's the limit the rest of the way, in my opinion. But if you don't get him comfortable in those first two and you're quote unquote saving him for NC State, your first big game on the road, or you're quote unquote saving him for Ohio State, like that's not going to work. He doesn't need to be that kind of a weapon. He needs to be an every down potential possibility on this offense, because that obviously makes the rest of the offense that much better. So they need to take advantage of these first two games. They need to take advantage of the fact that they've got some real skill at the slot position in number two. I mean, I think fans are going to be pleasantly surprised. Now, look, anybody that's listening to us knows that we're high on what Chris Tyree can do to this offense and what he can bring to the table. But the overall fan base, man, I don't think they understand what they're going to see from Chris Tyree. I honestly believe that.
I understand some of the hesitation. I do completely. Because Chris Tyree is a big-time recruit. I mean, fastest player in high school football. He did that twice. I mean, he was the fastest man at the opening 2 years in a row. Won the fastest man contest.
Yep.
As a sophomore and as a junior, he had the fastest 55-meter dash time for any player in the country, any track guy in the country in his class. And so those things all factored into it where, and again, at the time, Notre Dame was a team that didn't have great speed at that moment on the team, right? I mean, if you remember the 2020 receiving corps, Vince, was, Avery Davis, Ben Skoranek, and Javon McKinley, all good football players, not exactly burners at that point in time. And so when you look at the excitement, top 100 player, you beat Oklahoma and Alabama to get Chris Tyree. And they just have never been able to figure out a way to use him. I still remember Brian Kelly's absurd comment in 2020 about, well, he's just a guy that gives Kyron Williams a breather. That said so much about what was wrong with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, right? Is that you can't find a way to use a kid like Chris Tyree in your offense. And we've just been waiting. And then, he was a little banged up in 2021. So some of the early season momentum, I mean, we forget early in 2021, Chris Tyree was a factor. He had a 55-yard touchdown against Toledo, which was huge in that game, a game that you won at the very end. He has the complete game-changing kick return against Wisconsin. Wisconsin had just taken the lead in the fourth quarter. And then from that moment on, Notre Dame just rolled them. And a lot of it was because of that, because you had just lost. Jack Cohn had just got knocked out of the game. Drew Pine comes in, he gets sacked, he fumbles the ball. Wisconsin gets it, they're going to outscore. And Vince, you were there, man. The momentum of that stadium completely swung.
That game was in doubt. Yeah. That game was in doubt before that happened. It was. And that just
completely changed the momentum of that.
It was game over.
That was one of the biggest swings I'd seen in a Notre Dame game in a while. And then he got banged up and wasn't the same guy. Came back later in the year, had a nice long run against Stanford. Then, of course, had the 100-yard game in the bowl game when Kyron Williams decided not to play. Chris Tyree goes out there and has over 100 yards in the bowl game, receiving. And then last year, they just refused to build around him. But what a lot of people forget is Chris Tyree was the spark of the Notre Dame offense last year, early on. It was Chris Tyree that sparked him against Cal, not Audric. It was Chris Tyree. And even when you go look, you say, well, Audric had that really long catch. But that long catch was built off of a action where they were selling Chris Tyree that got them kind of running with him. And then they brought it back with Audric. On that little angle route. But I think they ran like a swing to Chris, and then the linebackers kind of ran with Chris, and they ran that little backside swing out of 21 personnel. It was a great play call. But Chris Tyree had 142 yards of total offense if you include kick returns in that game, but he had over 100 yards of offense. He had 108 yards rushing and receiving, 64 rushing, 44 receiving. Did the same thing against North Carolina, had 80 rushing yards, 24 receiving yards in that game. And he dropped a screen pass the next game against BYU, and I feel like from that moment on, they just said they're not using him anymore. And it was just one of the weirdest things where a guy that was so important to your offense just completely stopped getting the football after that. So, he had 24 touches against Cal, 19 against North Carolina. He never had more than 14. And in the last six games of the year, he was at 10 twice, and then that was really it. And it just is one of those things where it just was kind of like a waste of a player. You just didn't get him enough touches, in my opinion. But he was important to that offense early in the year. And we said this, Vince, even though Notre Dame stopped using him, teams didn't stop reacting to him. And I've pointed this out. There were 2 big plays against South Carolina that were a result of how the defense was playing Chris Tyree. We talked about the big play to Braden Lindsey. But then remember early in the game, they ran that outside zone type of play, and South Carolina just set 5 guys and just blew it up behind the line. When Notre Dame came back to that a little bit later and they ran that same action, South Carolina overreacted to Tyree, and Tyler Buchner just kept it and ran for 20 easy yards. And that's the kind of guy he is, where if you're running a jet motion with Chris Tyree, and he is a part of your offense, meaning you'll actually get him the ball. Because if you're just running him jet and you're never getting the ball, they're just going to, it's just a motion, is shift and strength, just make a quick strength adjustment, we're good to go. But if you're a linebacker and you're actually worried about that guy getting a handoff, and all of a sudden they're coming back with Audric Estime, you're on your heels a little bit. And now you got number 7 running it down your throat.
Right.
That's what you get down to it. So, but I understand fans being hesitant to buy into the Chris Tyree. I don't call it hype, but potential. Because we're not hyping him up. We don't know what he's going to be as a wide receiver.
Right. We can only tell you what we've seen.
What the impact he could have if he's able to become a playmaker in this defense. But there's honestly, in my opinion, no guy who could have a greater impact on the outcome of this offense than him. Now, you could say, I'm not talking about compared to last year, because if you're going to compare it to last year, it's Sam Hartman, and it's not even close.
Sure.
We're just talking about, okay, but you already have Sam Hartman. You know who he is. Who could have the biggest impact on what this team can be? If Chris Tyree's just kind of a non-factor, you could still be pretty good on offense.
Sure.
But if he becomes a factor, you could be really, really special on offense because
Agreed.
of what we talked about already.
Yeah. Second guy on our list, and this is a position group that we've been keeping our eye on, and it's funny because I do listen to some other people, and it's just amazing to me the thoughts about the running back room. I can't help it.
I still don't get that.
It's kind of
you call me mad all the time about things that are said.
It's like
a
car accident.
I can't listening to it, man.
I can't look away. Okay. But anyway, we're talking about for the running back room, right? We're talking about competition behind Audric Estime. Look, Audric Estime is number 1, and we know what we're going to get from Audric Estime. That's why he's not on this list, okay? But this is 2023 college football. You need more than one back. You need more than one back, and if that second back is what we think he can be, that's an X factor. And we both put Jadarian Price down as our running back X factor because the talent is unmistakable. Coming off the injury is the big question mark, right? Because a year ago, he was potentially the number 1 guy in a room that had Audric Estime and Logan Diggs in it. And then he got injured. And an Achilles injury is a very serious injury, and it's very tough to get your explosion back, your cut and drive, things of that nature. And if I didn't know that he was coming off of this injury, based on what I've seen at practice, I wouldn't know that he was injured. I'm being honest, I wouldn't know. He's got that explosion. He's got that cut and go. And if he lives up to what he is able to do, I think he locks down that number 2 running back spot. And that is absolutely what could be an X factor for this team when Audric Estime is either next to him or on the sideline. And I think it could be special, Brian. I really do.
I mean, you could go with Jabron Payne here. You could go with Jeremiah Love here. I mean, they're loaded at running back, and I don't know what's being said, but that's just a fact.
That Audric, they're excited about the running back room.
We don't need to. I don't care to rehash.
Okay, I was just gonna say. I was just shocked.
I don't know. I don't care.
I'm like, what?
I don't know. Don't care. Here's what I know. I've been around this team for a long time. I've seen a lot of good running backs come through the years. This is as deep and as athletic as an explosive as Notre Dame has been in a very, very long time at running back. And the reason I'm going with Jadarian Price over the others, as good as I think Jabron Payne could be, and as good as as much as I think Devin Ford can help as in a rotation role, and as good as we think Jeremiah Love can eventually be, the reason I'm going with Jadarian is because not only is he incredibly talented, but again, I'm going to kind of go back to the Chris Tyree conversation. It's very similar. A lot of the stuff we said about Chris Tyree, you can just insert here for Jadarian Price. is Notre Dame is more athletic than people give them credit for. But without Braden Lindsey, they're not as fast as they were last year. Just who we're looking at, who we know. Audric Estime, Jaden Thomas, Tobias Merriweather, Deion Colsey. Deion Colsey could be, but that's a different conversation we'll briefly touch on here in a little bit. But Tyree and Jadarian Price bring a different kind of speed. All those guys have good speed. They're not slow guys. This isn't a slow football team like it was in 2020, right? I mean, that 2020 team was slow. They were athletic, they were talented, but they were slow, right? Javon McKinley was a high 4.5. Kyron Williams was a high 4.5. Ben Skoranek was a high 4.5. Avery Davis was probably the only 4.4 they really had. And part of it was because of injuries. I mean, Braden Lindsey was hurt almost all year. Kevin Austin was hurt all year. Remember, he hurt his foot in the summer, came back for a couple games, hurt his foot again. So all your burners were injured. And so, or had quit the team because Lawrence Keys had quit the team. And he was one of your, then quit the team. He, transferred, get in the transfer portal. So Jadarian Price and Chris Tyree bring just an explosiveness. And you lost that when you moved Chris Tyree from running back to receiver. You kind of lost that element at running back based on what you had last year. Jadarian could potentially bring that back. And that's, to me, really the big thing because, Jabron Payne, I think, is could have – I'll say this right now. If Jabron Payne's ever Notre Dame starting running back, they're going to be just fine. I love that kid. But Jadarian Price brings – and Jabron can be he can be a hitter. I mean, you give him a crease, he's going to rip off some big runs too. He's got some juice as well. But Jadarian just plays at a different gear than everybody else at running back, including Jeremiah Love right now because Jabron is a little bit older, has a little bit more weight room time, and a little bit more confidence.
It's more confidence. It's a confidence thing, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even though he didn't play last fall, he did go through the whole spring the year before. So this fall camp wasn't his first one. So when I look at him, Vince, it's very similar to Chris Tyree. He brings an explosiveness to where if you've got to deal with him, if you have to deal with a healthy Jadarian Price and a healthy Audric Estime, and oh, by the way, we're going to throw Jabron Payne and Jeremiah Love at you at different times, this offense could be really, really scary when it comes to running the football.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's exciting. I'm sorry. It's super exciting. I when I think about this offense and what it could be from a point scoring standpoint to just a possessing the ball standpoint from a, we're going, hey, defense, what do you want to do? Okay, we're going to do this, and you can't stop it. Like, that's how I feel like this offense is going to be. So, all right. So let's move on to our third.
We had 3 in common, right, on offense, Vince? We had 3 in common?
This is our third one. So this is our third one. So we're going to go offensive line here. And this one might surprise some people. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure. But we both had it, so it didn't surprise either one of us. And we're talking about the competition.
We're either both really smart or both idiots.
Well,
we'll find out which one that is when we get.
We'll find out. And I want to give Jesse some credit here. Jesse Stiers, who co-hosts IB Nation Sports Talk. Wow. But anyway, when they did like a draft for the Blue Gold game, his first overall pick was this guy, Rocco.
I saw. I listened to that,
and I was
okay.
Like, I was not on board back then. Like, I wasn't. Now I'm all aboard the hype train right now, and here's why he's an X factor for me, Brian. And I have a feeling you're going to be in the same vein. But Rocco Spindler's ceiling is incredibly high at right guard. Okay, and now I'm not talking, Nelson high. Like, I'm not going there. Okay, but his ceiling is high at right guard. I'm nervous about the floor, but the floor appears to be rising, which is the good part. Okay. He is just a mauler at right guard. He's very different than Andrew Kristofic, and those are the two that are competing for the right guard spot. They're different guys. Can they both be successful on this offensive line? Absolutely. No doubt about it. Andrew's the kind of guy that is just Mr. Steady. He's going to be in the right place at the right time. He's going to battle his absolute tail off for you. I love that. I absolutely love that. He's the safe pick right now at right guard. Rocco's ceiling is higher than Andrew's just because of what he brings to the table in the run game and the fact that when he's right, he can kind of steal your soul by just mauling you in the run game. Okay. And that really excites me as a football coach. And if I'm building an offensive line, like, that's the kind of guy I want playing guard. I'm totally fine with Andrew. I really am. But Rocco kind of takes it to that next level, and that next level of offensive line, I mean, it takes the whole offensive line to a next level if he can be that guy. And that's what excites me about that.
It's not so much, Vince, that I think he is like this great player. That's kind of part. I mean, I think Rocco can be pretty good. I don't know that he's going to be a stud this year. The reason he's the X factor for me is a couple fold. Number one is I actually would like to see them not just play the same 5 guys all the time. I'm not quite sure that Emil Wagner is ready just yet for a full-time role should an injury happen. And I kind of like the idea of Andrew Kristofic being my Swiss Army knife. That's number one. You can't do that if he's still your best guard. You can't take one of your 5 best and put him in a Swiss Army knife role if he is your best right guard.
Sure.
Just can't. And so that's number one. Because Andrew Kristofic has played tackle in his career. He's played both guard spots, and he's played center younger. If you remember, they tried him at center a couple springs ago. Maybe it was last spring where they tried him at center as well. So he can play everywhere. The other factor, too, is, Vince, is I just have this vision of what I want this Notre Dame offense to be, which is really athletic on the perimeter and really big and powerful in the box. And Andrew Kristofic is a good football player. He's a quality football player. He's a steady football player. You know, I was talking with with a good friend the other day, Vince, and we were talking about, he said he was explaining to me why he felt Joe Alt was the MVP of the 2021 season. And he basically said when you look at what the offense became once Joe was inserted into the lineup, and I said, that's fair.
Sure.
I think there was other factors involved in that as well, but it wasn't just Joe. It was Joe and Andrew were both inserted in the starting lineup.
Yeah.
And so if Joe was a left tackle and the left guard was still as bad as it had been the first 5-6 games of the year, it doesn't matter that Joe Alt's the left tackle. It's still a problem. And Andrew doesn't get enough credit for that, for him and Joe together really stabilizing that offensive line in 2021. We know who he is. With Rocco, however, it's for me, it's not so much that I think Rocco can be better than Andrew. It's just stylistically, I want an offensive line that is big, physical, and moves people. And the reason I like that is, Vince, is number one, I've got a 230-pound monster at running back. And then behind him, I've got a bunch of slashers with home run speed.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what I want is I want a big physical line that reminds me as much as it can of the 2017 line, which it just moves people. And we always talk about, you had Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey. Best block of the season for me was not from either one of those two. It was Alex Bars. And it was against USC where he comes down, they're in an inside zone. He's got a tackle or a defensive lineman on his outside shoulder. He takes that guy with his right hand and throws him into the A-gap. And Josh Adams cuts right behind it for an 80-yard touchdown. And you were like 310, 315. McGlinchey, Q was 330. Mustafa was like 305. Bars was 320. And then you had, when Kramer was in the game, he was like 310, 315 at right tackle. Hainsey was about 290. So you got a little smaller when Hainsey was in the game. But when Kramer was in the game, that's a big offensive line. And I want to replicate that a little bit.
Right.
So if Rocco wins the job, he's like 10 pounds heavier than Andrew. Although Andrew looks
big. He looks bigger this year than he
does. And it's a good bigger.
Career.
Like it's in the chest, it's in the shoulders.
Here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe Andrew can be that mover, and this is a different conversation. But I can only go off of what we've seen in the past, and I know in what he's been in the past. But if Rocco becomes that guy where him and Billy Schrauth step up as the guards, this Notre Dame team is going to be a really big, physical, movement-based offensive line, where last year it was kind of that at times. But we've talked about this. As good as Josh Lugg was last year, and he was very underrated last season, by the way.
Very.
He just had so many injuries. He just wasn't the mover he was early in his career. He was a do-your-job guy. And you need guys that do your job on the offensive line. That's priority numero uno. But if I can do my job and then move this guy 2 feet, 1.5 feet, a foot even, that's enough that a guy like Audric Estime and Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne and Jeremiah Love, that's all those guys need to gash you. And so, where the other guard's just kind of like, hey, I'm here and I'm doing my job. You go do what you got to do. And that's why I think if Rocco wins the job, and this is the nice thing is if Rocco's starting at right guard at any point in time, I can promise you it's for one reason and one reason only, because he's playing well. You are not putting Andrew Kristofic on the bench if someone else doesn't take that job from him.
Agreed.
In my opinion. And that's a good thing. So that's why Rocco, and we could have gone Billy Schrauth, but I feel like with Billy, like he kind of, he's already there.
But don't you feel like you kind of know what you're going to get from Billy? I mean, to a degree.
It's not that I know what I'm going to get. It's like he's already at the left guard spot.
Right.
But I'm part of my thing is I'm assuming a certain level of production from him.
Right.
I'm also assuming a certain level of inconsistency from him.
Exactly. 100%.
Whereas Rocco's a junior now, and the expectation is, yes, Rocco can also move people, but you're a vet now. You should be a little bit more assignment correct than Billy Schrauth is.
Sure.
And so if your right guard is a guy that's kind of inconsistent, and your left guard's a little inconsistent, then you're going to have some consistency issues running the football. If Rocco can become a steady force, and now you just got to worry about Billy, because now I can do things to game plan for Billy's inconsistency, right? Like, hey, we're going to run inside zone to him, not away from him as much. So that way I'm cutting back to Blake and Rocco. Or we're going to run counter where, we're pulling Billy, right? So it's a little bit more, he's a little bit more comfortable there. There's things that you can do to kind of protect him a little bit if he's not, if he is a little bit inconsistent. So that's why Rocco's my number 3, Vince. I just, I feel like if he see, and Billy was under consideration for one of these.
Okay.
But my argument for him not being on it is going to be the same as my next guy. Why I don't have the same guy you did.
Okay.
That I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that I don't have him as an X factor. But when I explain it, I think you'll understand. And I feel the same way about Billy.
Very good. So let's talk about the 4th guy. And you want to do mine first, then yours first, then mine?
Okay. Yeah, let's go you first.
Okay. So the 4th guy on my list is Tobias Merriweather. And I've been talking about him ad nauseum all off season, and even more so now that we've been able to watch these guys in person in the fall. He's really rounded out physically. I feel like, he's more of a dominating presence in person. We all knew or at least we all thought we knew what he could be last year, right? But you look at it on paper, right? 1 catch, 1 touchdown. That's it for the whole season. Now, it took him a while to get on the field for various reasons, whatever. Then he was dealing with some injuries and things like that, so he couldn't get back on the field when I really thought that his year was going to take off. I think we all thought that. But he's in a prime position to be kind of the alpha of this wide receiving core, in my opinion. Now, I still think Jaden Thomas is going to lead the team in receptions. I think he's going to be kind of that guy that gets the most catches. But I also feel like Tobias Merriweather is going to lead the team in yards and yards per catch, things like that. He can be that explosive outside receiver who can take the top off the defense. He can catch those back shoulders. He can be that guy that's going to go up and get those 50-50 balls, that kind of a thing. That can be Tobias's game, and I think he can bring this wide receiving core. Like, if he's stretching the field, that leaves a hole underneath for Tyree and Thomas and Colsey and whoever else, Greathouse, the whole group, right? And I just feel like he's going to be a very, 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 very important part of this offense, because if he doesn't step up, then I do feel like the offense does not take the step that Notre Dame and fans and analysts and everything else want and need this offensive side of the ball to take. So he needs to be that guy, and he's an X factor because I think he can be that guy, and I think he can really take this offense to another level. But I also expect it too, so I can see why he might not be on your list, Brian.
That's exactly it. He's not on my list because I already have a level of expectation for Tobias.
That's fair. I get that.
Right. Totally. It's like, and now that may not be fair, right? It may not be fair. The other reason is we've already kind of talked about him in a lot in the breakout conversation, right?
Sure.
Like we've kind of already predicted a breakout for Tobias. So it's kind of like, it may not be fair, but it's just where I'm at with him, that I expect him to step up, seize a starting job, be one of the top receivers, if not the top receiver, and just kind of be that guy. And so I also think that Tobias, just the nature of the position he plays, even if he's good, he's going to impact the defense. But you can take him out if you want to as a defense, if he's it, right? And that's why, to me, Chris Tyree is more of an X factor, because if Chris Tyree is playing well and being utilized in a lot of different ways, post wheels and out cuts and slants and crossers and overs and seams and screens and stuff like that, now all of a sudden it's a lot harder for you to say, we got to take 5 out. We got to stop 5. And that's my whole thing, Vince, is where Chris Tyree could have a huge impact on Tobias Merriweather. Tobias Merriweather doesn't necessarily have an impact on Chris Tyree, because Chris Tyree's success is going to be up to Chris Tyree. You know what I mean? Where if you're an outside receiver, if a team wants to take you out, they can take you out. I mean, Ohio State did that to Will Fuller in 2015, if you remember. They basically said, we're not letting Will Fuller beat us. Somebody else is going to have to beat us today. We're going to double him and all. And then the only big play he had was late in the game when cornerback fell. He beat a guy, and then the corner fell down, and you're not catching Will if you slip. But They did a nice job. Clemson did that. Clemson did a nice job that year, if you remember, of saying, hey, we're going to double this kid, and we're not going to let him beat us.
Sure.
And somebody else is going to step up and beat us, and nobody could. Right. And that's kind of how I feel about Tobias. If Tobias is everything we think he can be, that's huge for the offense, right? But good defenses, Ohio State, USC schematically, but more so Clemson and Ohio State, Georgia in the playoff, Michigan in the playoff, Penn State in the playoff, Texas in the playoff, Oregon in the playoff. I mean, pick any potential, LSU in the playoff, pick any potential playoff team, and most of them are going to have the ability in the secondary and from a coaching standpoint to say, if 5's all you got, we're not going to let him beat us. And that's why I consider him Chris Tyree more of an X factor, because of the impact he has on the whole thing. And so that's why, nothing you said is incorrect, Vince. It's just I'm looking at it a little bit different.
Oh, I get it.
And that's why
I see that point of view.
I'm Tyree here. My pick at number 5 is Holden Stace. So I kind of went a little bit outside the box here on this one, because, man, I've really been impressed by what we've seen from him this spring.
You're talking about physical specimen.
I'm not one of those people that's like, just he's going to start, he's their best tight end. We haven't seen these kids block like once with pads on, right? So there's a lot we need to see from the tight ends before I'm ready to kind of start saying he's the best. He's the smoothest athlete they have. He's probably right now the best pass catcher they have right now, but there's a lot we need to see from him. But man, if he kind of steps up and continues to look this spring, and I mean in the fall into the season, the way he has in fall camp, boy, I tell you what, he has a big impact, because he's not Michael Mayer, nobody is, but the impact is he does things a lot differently than Michael Mayer as a tight end. He's a guy that you can literally, Vince, put out at wide, and you did that with Michael Mayer, but the routes you're going to use with him out wide are a lot different than the routes you're going to use with Michael Mayer. And we've already seen some of that stuff. Without getting into specifics, we've already seen some of that stuff. And so now I can go with him in the boundary and honestly attack you as an offense, Vince, like I'm in 10 personnel schematically. But then on that same play, I can bring him in as a attached and when I go 12 personnel now, if I'm Notre Dame. And I'm in Jared Parker's shoes, I can go 12 personnel now and give you a completely different look than we gave you 12 personnel last year. Now he's got to learn, he's got to be able to block. And I'm not saying he can, I'm just saying we haven't seen it.
Sure.
Because we haven't seen them blocking in practice so far. The only blocking physical we saw them doing was the first day with no pads on. That's just irrelevant.
That's not a thing.
So he's got to learn to block, because then he's got to be that weapon in 12 personnel where he can actually line up and give you some just give me good effort, give me good technique, be assignment correct. I don't need you to crush people. Just do your job. And he already showed me last year he'll compete in the run game. I mean, he already showed he'll compete in the run game. Now he just has to get stronger and be more assignment correct this season. So he's just a guy, Vince, where if you've got Holden Stace and Chris Tyree on the field together, you can do so much stuff. Like somebody asked on the message board today, would you like to see Notre Dame do a lot of 20 personnel? And I was like, not a lot. I want to see it as a wrinkle, but it's not a main thing. I said for 2 reasons. Number one is 20 personnel is just not an every down alignment. But you're also kind of already in 21 personnel when you're in 11 personnel because of Chris Tyree's presence. You already kind of have that element that you would have if you went with a second back. I did say this: if I don't see at least one series where I've got Audric Estime, Jadarian Price, and Chris Tyree in the field together, I'm going to cry. So I'm gonna say that, Coach Parker, Jared Parker, just do me one solid, all right? Tommy Reese ignored me for 3 years. Chip Long ignored me about Avery Davis throwing a pass, okay? Don't you ignore me as well. Give me at least one series with Audric, Jadarian Price, and Chris Tyree all in the field. Give me a 20 personnel look, split backfield, Chris Tyree in the slot, and have some fun with it, okay? And I don't even care if it's against Tennessee State. Just let me see it.
Just let you just soak it in.
And then let the other team see it as well. So, but when you look at Holden Stace, Vince, if he is as good as we hope, knock on wood, he can be based on how he's been in the spring. Because here's the thing, Holden Stace didn't just come out of nowhere this fall camp. He started to show us some of this spring. We've talked about him before. And if Mitchell Evans continues to improve, and if Holden Stace can be a legitimate, this kid has to play kind of guy, man, you've got some really interesting wrinkles. Because we've talked about this before. Last year when you went 12 personnel, you had two of the same dude on the field, and Michael Mayer and Mitchell Evans. Yep. Meaning, not that Mitchell Evans is the same player as Michael Mayer, but the concepts you're going to run, the way you're going to use them, is almost identical as far as conceptually.
Right.
With Holden Stace, you can use him in a lot different ways schematically, conceptually, than you used Mitchell Evans or Michael Mayer. So it just gives you a little bit, a really, not even a little bit, a really different look in 12 personnel than you've had. And so that's why I look at him and say he could be an X factor. And again, so here's the big thing, Vince. You start stacking these up, the more of these guys that play well, the better, right? And that's the fun, exciting thing is, if Tyree is what we hope it can be, if Jadarian Price is healthy, because that's really that's it for him, right? It's really just health. The talent is there. We saw it already in the spring. It's just getting the dude stay healthy. If Rocco steps up and plays well, if Tobias is what we think he's going to be, because again, I didn't disagree with you for what Tobias is going to be. I just disagreed. Not even disagreed. I just chose not to have him here because of the assumption he's going to already be something.
Sure.
If Holden Stace steps up, man, this is going to be something special. And there was one other guy that I really thought about putting into this category, and that's Deion Colsey. He's the only other guy that I look at and say, if the light goes on,
that's the thing. Yeah.
Right. But I feel like we've already talked a lot about that, which is part of the reason I chose not to talk about him again in this part.
His name crossed my mind too, because
there's a lot of those guys though, Vince, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the thing, is that's what's so exciting, but also honestly somewhat concerning about this team. If we're being honest and objective, these are some really talented players. But every single one, as of right now, is still an if. It's still an unknown. It's still an unproven. The more of them that step up, the better this offense is going to be. But there's still a lot of unknown commodities that need to become known. Will they happen? I think some will.
Sure.
How many? We don't know. And that's really what we're going to learn about this football team going into the season.
So let's jump over to the other side of the football, and we each tallied up some defensive X factor guys, and we came up with 4 apiece, and of course 2 overlap. So we'll talk about those 2 guys first, and let's start on the defensive line and with Riley Mills. Now, Riley Mills has been a topic of conversation for us and anybody else that follows Notre Dame football for a few years now. I mean, let's be honest, a few years now. In my opinion, this is the first year where they've actually put him into a position to be successful. Like, I just felt like he was kind of cross-training between end and tackle, and then, okay, we're going to lean towards end and, whatever. He is just a defensive tackle this year. He's put on the weight. The weight is good weight, number one. He seems explosive. He seems big. He seems like he's going to be a very disruptive force on the defensive line from the tackle position. That's why he's an X factor for me, because I don't want to say this is a make or break situation for Riley Mills, but it kind of feels like it is. Like, we've been talking about him for a little while now, and I feel like this is his year to really break out. And if he does, then this defensive line goes to another level because now you have a guy that can make plays in the backfield on a consistent basis. And that's what excites me about Riley Mills.
I'm going to say it this way, Vince, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on Riley because we've talked a lot about him this summer. It's not a make or break year for Riley Mills because, number one, he's been a quality football player for Notre Dame the last 2 years.
Agreed.
He has.
Agreed.
I've pointed this out before. His per snap production is significantly better than what Jerry Tillery's was his first 3 years, and better than what Sheldon Day's was. Not as significantly better, but still better than what Sheldon Day's was, especially as a pass rusher. He already has more sacks going into his senior year than both of those guys had going into their senior years. Those guys, Sheldon had a slightly more tackles for loss, but Riley's been used primarily as kind of a pass rusher type of guy. He's up to 306 now. He's carrying it well. I got a picture that Angela took she was shooting photos, Vince, and I'm going to try to pull it up here real quick while we're going through this to just show how big he is. Because when we explain to people, there's anyone can get up to 300 pounds, right? It's can you get up to 300 pounds and it be healthy weight and good weight? That's more of the question. And that was kind of the question we had about Riley is this going to be good weight or not? And it is, and I'll pull it up. But it's not so much a make or break year for him because if he just keeps doing what he's doing, he's a quality football player. It's not like he's going to get benched or beat out or something like that if he just keeps doing what he's been doing. He is his performance could be the make or break factor for Notre Dame being an elite defense, championship. I shouldn't say elite, a championship caliber defense, because I don't think they have to be elite on defense to win a championship. They just have to be really good.
Yes, absolutely. They need to hold their own. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
In past years, they had to be elite because they didn't have the offense to win it.
Absolutely,
they had to be able to hold Clemson to 17 to have a shot to win. And that just wasn't going to happen. They don't have to do that now. And so they just have to be really good. You still have to be really good on defense to me, in my opinion, to still win a championship, unless your offense is just LSU 19, that kind of thing. So anyway, Vince, with Riley, he to me more than anybody else holds the key to this being that kind of defense, because it's similar to the conversation I've had with other guys. X factors to me, Vince, are not just guys who have an impact, production and all that. It's guys that have an impact and their performance then impacts so many others around him. If Riley Mills is a force up the middle, then what's the first thing that ensures, Vince? The absolute first thing that ensures is Howard Cross is getting a bunch of one-on-one blocks. It's very hard to double team 3 guys up front. It's very hard to do.
Absolutely.
So, and it's very hard to double team 2 inside guys. And if you're double teaming 2 inside guys, then your tackles and your linebackers are wreaking havoc on other people. And that's the other part is if Riley Mills is as good as we hope he can be, it's going to have a huge impact on the linebackers as well. And that's kind of where you start getting a little bit fired up about what this team could be, is if he steps up and can be that disruptive playmaker that I know he has the potential to be. He's flashed it at times. It's not like we haven't seen it. We've seen it. It's just, can he do it consistently? That's been the question. And if he does, and the light finally goes on a little bit for him this year, man, I'm gonna tell you what, Vince, like this kid's gonna have a chance to do something.
Be special.
Yeah. I'm gonna show you this picture that Angela put up before we move on to somebody else, because it just kind of shows, like, when I talk about there's a difference between like putting on good weight or bad weight, and you look at Riley and you're just like, that's good weight. That's just a big boy. I'm going to pull this picture up here real quick and put it over here. Pull it up. And because for you, Angela's actually our photographer at Irish Breakdown. So this is from one of the earlier practices of fall camp. This is a picture. I mean, you just see how like big his arms are, like that. He's got big forearms, big arms. His gut is that of a defensive end, really, a big end, right? Like there's not gut there. He's just big.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a massive kid. And there's some other photos that she took that show that as well, where you're just like, this is just a big, thick, country boy.
Photographs don't do it justice either.
Yeah.
Can I just say that? Yeah. Like in person, you're just like, okay, this is a mountain of a man.
Yes. You know what he is, Vince? He's like that guy that Nebraska used to have back in the day.
Sure.
right? The Jason
Just
Peters,
corn-fed,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, remember when Nebraska had those just elite defenses? Christian Peter. It was, I'm trying to think. It was Jason Peter. It was Grant Winstrom. Just all those big defensive linemen they had. And they just were just massive. They weren't fat. They were just thick. And that's how Riley is, in my opinion. And that's why you look at him and say, okay, if the light needs to go on, if it does, they're going to be pretty good.
Sure. Now, this next guy, we have talked about a considerable amount in the past, and I will not shy away from the fact that he's one of my favorite players on the team as far as what I think he can be and all of that. And I know he's one of your favorites too, and it's probably one of the reasons that he's on your list because he's on my list as well. And it's Xavier Watts. And I remember we did a show, I think last week, and somehow we came up on the topic of like X factors or guys that can change the game or whatever. And
well, you brought it up, and then that kind of sparked this. We're like, you know what, we're going to do an X Factor show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was the first one that came to my mind when I'm thinking X factors on defense, because I think that we all know what the corner situation is at Notre Dame. We do, right? And I think the national media is getting on board with who the corners are. I don't think that the safeties get a whole lot of respect, and I get it. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying they don't get a lot of respect. Now, I think Xavier Watts has the opportunity this year to really make a name for himself and to prove a lot of people not wrong necessarily, but just, hey guys, don't forget about me kind of a situation. Yeah. Like, I know those guys were elite, but guess what? So am I. And the reason he's an X factor for me is because, okay, well, when you're creating an offensive game plan against a defense, the first thing I always did when I was putting together a game plan is I would identify who the dudes were on the other side of the ball. You just identify who they are, and then you kind of make your plan with that in mind, right? Well, when you do that for Notre Dame, you should say Morrison. You should have Hart in that conversation. You should be talking about some of the guys at the front. They're probably not going to be talking about the guys at safety, at least at the beginning of the season. I think that changes as the season goes on because of how to play or how to go against this defense from a passing standpoint, from a running standpoint. You're going to have to take into account Xavier Watts. And if you're taking into account Xavier Watts and you're taking into account Cam Hart and you're taking into account Benjamin Morrison, you're almost out of options. And that is going to make everybody else better because now more balls are going to be going to Morrison. And more balls are going to be going to Hart. And you know what I mean? And so his presence and his play, if he can step up to the level that you and I think he can step up to, he absolutely affects the other guys on the defense in a positive way.
I think I agree with everything you said, so I'm not going to rehash it. I'm just going to add a little piece onto this.
Cool.
Notre Dame, if they're going to have a champion, because this is what it's all about, right? This is all about, can Notre Dame play for championship or not? And to me, that's going to be hard to do if they're not better at forcing turnovers. And to me, the most disruptive player at safety by far is Xavier Watts.
Oh, yeah.
And we saw it last year, Vince. I mean, this isn't even just us hoping and wishing upon a prayer that Xavier Watts can be that guy that we thought he was going to be in high school. There is still some of that. But we saw enough late last year to say, hey, this kid's actually pretty good. And when you look at his numbers last year, you're like, yeah, this kid's pretty good.
Yeah.
Xavier Watts played 366 snaps last year. He had more run stops than any safety on the roster.
Crazy.
And the next closest was Brandon Joseph, and Brandon Joseph played like 70 more snaps than he did. And he had 7.
Which is
this according to Pro Football Focus, right? Xavier had 13, almost twice as many on 70 fewer snaps. Houston Griffith played about 62 fewer snaps than Xavier, which is a game, and he had 6 run stops last year. Ramon Henderson played 319 snaps, about 47 fewer than Xavier. He had 5 run stops. So, I mean, your next 2 safeties combined on 735 combined snaps had the same number of run stops as Xavier Watts did last year. Xavier also had half of the safety positions passes defensed last year. They had 6. He had 3 of them.
Wow.
Right. So, so the numbers are very clear of what we have
Yeah.
already seen from him.
Sure.
Now it's about he's got to become more fundamentally consistent. That's
Right.
been Xavier's issue. I go back to the play against Stanford 2 years ago when Stanford had that game was already out of line, or out of hand. Notre Dame was dominating. But you remember that tight end in cut that Ben Urasek caught, and then he went for a touchdown?
Yes,
and
I
Xavier
do.
took a bad angle and then slipped because he took a bad angle.
Yep.
Like, that's kind of the things that now that you're now in year 2 of playing safety, and year 3 where you've been at the position, but year 2 where it's just okay, full year, and really your first full year where you're not spending any time.
In fall camp last year, he was at wide receiver.
Right.
Remember that? Like
I do, because of once Avery went down and all that, and then Joe's health issues. But he was still a safety last year, and that receiver thing didn't last very long.
No, it was like
this year. It's not even a factor. So it's like clean up that stuff. And my whole thing is, if he can clean up the assignment correctness, the technical consist, and be more technically consistent, then he'll be in position more to make more plays. And he's already shown when he's in position, he can make a lot of plays. And so him taking that step where, look, just take what we saw from you against USC, the good stuff, and the BC game and the South Carolina game, and eliminate some of that stuff that's not about your athleticism or about your talent, but just about up here and just the grasp of the defense and being comfortable in what you're doing. Because being off in your alignment 5 to 6 inches can be the difference between an interception or a touchdown. You kind of laugh at that. It's serious,
legit,
especially when you're playing Ohio State.
Right.
If you're 6 inches misaligned against Marvin Harrison, it's a touchdown. Just is. You can get away with it against other teams, but you can't against Ohio State. You can't against USC. You can't against Clemson. And clean that stuff up, and now all of a sudden he starts making those plays. Those plays where he's getting to the receiver as soon as the ball is getting there and he's breaking it up. Now all of a sudden that's a pick. Or you're getting there as soon as the ball arrives and not right after it. And instead of making the tackle, you're now hitting that guy, ball's floating up in the air, and next thing you know, one of your guys is catching it and he's got room to run. Those are the kind of plays we just didn't see a lot from Notre Dame last year. What's the first time we saw the secondary making those kind of plays? It was Clemson. And it broke the game open. I mean, the offense didn't exactly light the world on fire that game, guys. They had like 360 yards of offense. They threw for 85 yards, right? The defense and the special teams making those game-changing plays are what broke that game open. If they don't make those plays, when Clemson finally starts putting a couple drives together, it's 14-0.
Right.
A whole different ball game, man. A whole different ball game. Actually, it technically be 7-0, Vince, because the other offensive touchdown came off of Benjamin picking that pass off at like the 12.
Yeah, right.
So Notre Dame had put one drive together.
Well, wasn't
one
the first
drive?
I thought the first score was the punt block, wasn't it?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so you look at 28 points. They had one good drive.
Gotcha.
You had the two defensive. That's why I said defense and special teams.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The offense only scored one touchdown up that point in time.
Yeah.
The offense didn't put another drive together till at the end of the game when it was 28-7.
Right.
So that's my point, is you need those plays. And if you can make them a little bit more regularly, and I'm not talking about pick sixes, I'm talking about turnovers.
Right.
Pass breakups. Get Caleb Williams in 3rd and 12 instead of being in 3rd and 5 when he can do the crazy stuff. That's where you can win a football game, to me. Get Kyle McCord out of his comfort zone and get him into, where he's thinking and not sure. And Mama, I'm worried about the number 0. Let me go over here. Oh, shoot, I forgot that's number 5. That's number 20. And that's where you really want to be. So that's where Xavier could have a huge impact on this defense, man. Huge impact on this defense.
No doubt. I'm really excited to watch him kind of take that next level and start getting some recognition for the player that we know he can be. I mean, he was just getting pushed around so much from a positional standpoint, offense, defense, like he's here. Now he has a chance to really make his name and all of that. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited for him. And I'm excited for the team and what he's about to bring to the team. And I know that sounds corny and personal and all that, but I don't know him from Adam. Like, he wouldn't know me at all, but just following his career and what he's been able to do at Notre Dame, like, this kid's got some talent, man. Yeah. And I'm ready to watch him make his mark for sure. So
our number 3, Vince, is we're coming at it from a similar standpoint. We're just two different players. I'm gonna let you kind of kick off the number 3 guy, but we're both, I believe, looking here for pass rush impact.
Okay.
So let's go with no. I believe that's where you're coming from. But
yeah, so I've got two guys left, and if you say pass rush, I know which one you're talking about. It's not the other one. So my third one is Jalen Snead, and he is on mine because number one, I know how excited everybody is that he's going to get an opportunity, and they wanted him to get an opportunity last year. The bottom line, he wasn't ready to be a guy that they counted on last year. He's a true freshman. He wasn't quite ready. Now he's a redshirt freshman. He's a sophomore. He's been in the system for 2 years now. Or this is the second year being in the system. They're going to be counting on him. There are going to be packages that are Jalen Snead's packages. Like, he is going to be counted on in this defense. And those packages are most likely going to be nickel, dime, that kind of a thing. And so he's going to be put in a position where everybody in the stadium knows they're going to be throwing the football. And Jalen Snead's going to be triggered to come get the football and make plays in the backfield and just some big time. He's going to have big time opportunities. If he can capitalize on those big time opportunities, man, you're talking about changing the game from a hype standpoint, from a field position standpoint, from a potential turnover standpoint, all of the above.
Look what Bo Bauer did in 21 and 22. Bo Bauer had the play that broke the pick game open in 2021. Right. Remember that? He had that pick in the middle of the field on I think it was a third down play.
Yep.
And Notre Dame's offense was scuffling. They had one long play to Ben Skowronek was about all they had really done on offense. And then Bo has that pick. Then Jeremiah gets his pick, and then Foskey blocks the punt. Next, you know, a 7-3 game turns into 28-3 game at halftime.
Right.
Well, you think of the Bo Bauer interception a couple years ago against I think it was USC, right? Wasn't it against USC? In 2021, remember that? Let me pull it up here. But he had the interception, and then he ran it back. He didn't score on it. But he ran it back and flipped the field. Let me find that play here real quick, Vince. I believe it was 2021. So yeah, let's see here.
I mean, anybody like you and I were huge Bo Bauer fans. I know I was. When he was here, I think he was way more integral to what this team was. I mean, he was super important, right?
It was 2021. It was a 7-0 game. He picked the pass off, ran it back inside the 5. The offense, of course, couldn't punch it in. They kicked the field goal, but all of a sudden, a potential 7-7 game because USC was driving turns into a 10-0 game.
Right.
So yeah,
I mean, look, Jalen Snead has more God-given gifts than Bo Bauer. Okay?
Like as an athlete, yeah.
As an athlete.
And Bo was athletic, but Jalen's really twitchy.
He was one of the better special teams guys that Notre Dame's ever had.
And a long time.
I mean, he was really, really good. So I'm not trying to diminish the impact that Bo Bauer had on this football team because I think it was huge. But I think Jalen Snead can have a huge impact on this football team this year as a sophomore. Yeah. And they're going to be counting on him to have a huge impact on this team. They are. And so, he's going to probably rotate in the base. He's going to have packages of his own. He's going to have plenty of opportunities to make a splash on this defense. And if he can live up to that potential, he takes this defense to another level. He just does. And he takes his team to another level because, like I said, it impacts the offense. It impacts the defense. I have a feeling he's going to be impacting special teams this year because, remember, he only played in 4 games last year, Brian. So he's full
First
go.
Game, I think it was against Navy, wasn't it?
Right. So he's full go now. Like, you can play him on special teams all year long. So he's just I believe he's going to have an impact up and down the roster, and I'm so fired up to see him play. So that's why he was my third guy.
My third guy is Jordan Botelho. And I thought about not putting him in here for the reasons I didn't put Tobias in the first one. But I still think he's a major unknown. Yes, I know he had the great bowl game, but there was also some not great film for him last year. It's just one of those guys where it's hard for me to envision Notre Dame having a championship caliber defense if they can't get any kind of edge rush. He doesn't have to be a 15-sack guy, but he's got to be a guy that in some big moments can put pressure on the quarterback. And he actually did that last year in the second half of the year. Had a couple really good pass rushes against Clemson. I believe he was not Clemson, Syracuse. I believe he is who blocked the punt against Syracuse, I believe. He either blocked it or recovered it. I forget which one.
Okay.
But if him and Riley Mills, I almost wanted to go with these guys 1 and 2, but we decided to go with the guys we both had on the same page. And they kind of go together, which is to win a championship, Vince, I just think unless you've got Joe Burrow in that 2019 LSU offense, that's the anomaly. You gotta have a pretty darn good defensive line, man.
Right.
I mean, that's an ingredient that just almost every championship team has had for the most part. I mean, even if you go back to like the first playoff, right, the 2014 playoff with Ohio State, that Ohio State team wasn't great that year, but man, that D line in the second half of the year was really, really good. I mean, you talk about having Joey Bosa, you had Michael Bennett, Adolphus Washington, you had Steve Miller, you had Rashad Frazier, Tyquan Lewis. You had some really good players. And then Darian Lee would come off the edge at times as well, who as a linebacker, but like they had a really, really good front. Bama in 15, Clemson in 16 and 18 had really good D lines. Bama in 17 had a really good D line. LSU actually wasn't bad on the D line. It was hard for them to really be an elite defense as much as their defense was on the field because their offense just scored so quickly.
Right.
But even that 2019 LSU defense had K'Lavon Chasen on there. You had Neil Farrell on there, Rashad Lawrence, Braden Fahiko was on that team. You know, as guys kind of played up the middle. Tyler Shelvin, it's a highly ranked guy coming out. Glenn Logan, you weren't bums by any stretch. Obviously, the 2020 Bama D line was pretty good. So I mean, we've seen Georgia. Obviously, the last 2 years has been great up front. You can't win unless you're just insanely good on offense. If you don't have a really good D line, and if you can't rush the quarterback, you're going to have a hard time winning 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 against Ohio State, Clemson, and USC. And you're also going to have a hard time beating all 3 of Duke, NC State, and Louisville if you can't rush quarterback.
Right. Got to put pressure on those quarterbacks.
Right. And Jordan Botelho, to me, is the key figure to that. Yeah. I think Jalen Snead is going to be part of that. Riley Mills is going to be part of that. Sure. But if the Vipers not getting after the quarterback, it's hard for me to envision them having that kind of defensive line. So that's why, to me, Jordan Botelho is an X factor. But you could even argue he should be number 1.
No, I get that. I totally get that. And he's an X factor for me as well because he was under consideration for me because he's just, to me, just what he's done or not done as he's been here at Notre Dame. I think of him and it's like like the 60s version of Batman and the Joker would come out, or the Riddler, and it would just be that giant question mark. Like Jordan Botelho is a giant question mark to me for all of the above, right? I'm ready for him to not prove me wrong, but to prove that, like, to erase the question mark. I just want him to be somebody that Notre Dame can count on. He's got all the physical tools, man. And we've seen it. We've seen glimpses of it. If he can put it all together on the field, off the field, just put it all together, he can absolutely be a catalyst to this defense. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
I just need him to erase that question mark for me. You know what I mean? And so
that's why I have him here and not as an assumed guy.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Agreed.
So Vince, let's wrap it up. We kind of both are in the secondary for our last one. And and everyone, if y'all have been a part of this show for over the last 2 years and you don't know who Vince's last X factor is, you just haven't been paying attention to my boy. That's just another. Hey, there was another picture, Vince, I wanted to show. This one actually one that I think is a little bit better before we get to the last one of Riley that she took. So like there you can see like how massive his arms and shoulders are.
Well, look at Onye back there.
I know, right?
He's not a small dude either.
Right. Exactly. Jeez. So that's a big boy.
Oh, that's good.
Let's go number 4, Vince. And your number 4 X factor is?
It's Cam Hart. I mean, come on. It's Cam Hart. And look, the corners are getting a lot of publicity. They're getting a lot of love. But let's be honest, a lot of that love is because of Benjamin Morrison. Okay. People know about Cam Hart, and that's great. But I just feel like if he can make teams pay for staying away from Benjamin Morrison, then of course he's going to influence the rest of this defense. Of course he's going to influence the team and everything else. But man, I feel like if he can stay healthy, and that's a huge if, because that's been his bugaboo for the last few years, his shoulder and all that. If he can stay healthy, what we've seen from him in fall camp is a guy who is long, a guy who is physically put together, a guy who battles for the football until the last possible second. He's physical. Like the play he made on, was it Rico Flores, wasn't it? And he just
where he tried to come off and like do like the little I'm gonna juke you, and Cam was like go on
Cam
the
was
ground.
like boom and just hit him, and then he goes and then Rico goes to the ground. It's like, okay, dude, fifth year senior, you're a true freshman. Like, okay, but he's gonna take that physicality and the ball skills that he has, and he's just gonna. I feel like he's going to remind people who he was, or who he is.
Here's who he was last year. Benjamin Morrison got all the attention because of the interceptions, and rightfully so. Benjamin was excellent for a freshman last year.
There's a reason they went that way.
But for most of the season, I'll put it this way. Cam Hart was their best corner for a lot longer portion of the season than Benjamin Morrison was, especially once he got through his hamstring issue, which kind of plagued him against Ohio State. But other than that, the one pass interference early, which I thought was questionable. And then you had the bad angle on the touchdown. I mean, he settled in after that. Now you can't give up those plays. You can't allow Ohio State to get those easy touchdowns. You got to make Ohio State work for him. But Cam is an excellent player this year. An excellent play. Here's my X factor for him. It's simple. Can he stay healthy?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. That's
he does.
It's like my X factor. If I'm gonna, it'd be more of like Cam Hart's shoulder would be my shoulders would be my X factor.
Right.
Absolutely. Is more so than anything else, because if he's healthy, we've seen what he can do.
Right. We're gonna see national pundits halfway through the season, especially after the Ohio State game.
Right.
If things go the way I'm hoping that they go, I mean, look, that's the matchup, right? It's Ohio State's wide receivers, Notre Dame secondary, the whole thing, right? You're gonna see breakdowns, and they're gonna get on the whiteboard, and they're gonna show you how Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart played in that game in a positive way. Like, that's what I envision for this.
You can't beat Ohio State if they don't play well. You just can't.
Absolutely correct.
Can't.
And that's how they're
all the guys we just talked about: Riley Mills, Jordan Botelho, Cam Hart, Xavier Watts. You can't beat Ohio State if those guys don't. And that's what it comes down to right there. Sure. There's two teams on the schedule you can't beat if the majority of those four guys don't play really well. That's Ohio State and USC.
Yeah,
just can't.
Yep,
just can't.
Absolutely.
And that's just basically what it comes down to. My fourth Vince is Thomas Harper.
Okay.
I think this team is going to be in a lot of nickel defense this year because of the nature of who they play. I mean, we've talked about the big three: Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. Those are all teams you're going to be in a lot of nickel. You're going to be in a lot of nickel against North Carolina State. I mean, people forget that this offense has really been when you look at what Robert and I has done in recent years, it's been very impressive. 2 years ago at Virginia, he was the offensive coordinator for an offense that their starting quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, in only 11 games, passed for 4,449 yards that year. He also rushed for 251 yards and accounted for 40 touchdowns that season. He goes to Syracuse last year, and if you remember the conversation we had preseason was they cannot throw the football. Their their offense in 2021, year before Robin and I got there, they had 10 touchdown passes and only threw for 1,836 yards. He comes in, same quarterback, they throw for 3,015 yards and 19 touchdowns and 9 picks. Right? Now, that quarterback from Virginia and I are going to be at NC State. Moral of the story, they're going to throw the ball a lot.
Right.
Okay. Duke's going to – I don't know that Duke's going to throw it a lot, but they're going to spread you out. They've got really good receivers. They're going to get their quarterback on the perimeter. They're going to run RPOs. Louisville's Jeff Brom. We all know Jeff Brom loves to throw the football. Wake Forest is on the schedule. Troy Taylor, the head coach of Stanford, they're a spread you out kind of air raid-ish type of team. A big chunk of your schedule is going to force you to be in your nickel defense a big chunk of the game. And that's Thomas Harper. It's got to be Thomas Harper.
Right.
If Clarence Lewis can do some good things, but you want Clarence Lewis to be a rotation guy for you, not the guy. And my thing with Thomas Harper, Vince, it's the same as Cam Hart. It's not even about his ability. I know he has it. I've seen him do it. It's, can he stay healthy? How quickly can he pick up the system, and can he stay healthy? That's it. That's what it comes down to. So he's a big factor for me as well. If he can pick up the defense quickly and play like he did last year at Oklahoma State and then stay on the field, he's going to be a really good football player. And he's going to be replacing a guy that was very important in last year's defense. Very important. Defense.
He's a guy that is very missed. Like, if you gave me, I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that I would think of before I say this, but if If you gave me the option of bringing one guy back from last year's team, a lot of people would say Isaiah Foskey, whatever.
Last year's defense.
Yes, yeah, specifically the defense.
Mine's because I'm sorry, I'm not taking Tariq Bracy back over Michael Mayer. I love Tariq Bracy.
Talk about defense.
Let's say defense.
Yeah. But it's Tariq Bracy. I'm sorry. I just think he was so important to what they wanted to do defensively last year, and he made so many plays that people just don't realize. You know what I mean? And I would take him back in a heartbeat.
So that's our 4, Vince.
Yeah, those are our X factors from offense and defense. And hope
was
you
there
enjoyed
anybody
it.
else that you considered on defense? There really wasn't for me. I kind of thought about maybe going with Javonte Jean-Baptiste because I do think that the big end position is a little bit of a concern for me right now. I thought about putting like a J.D. Bertrand on there, Jack Kaiser. I think the way that they're going to use Jack Kaiser this year, but it really came down to it. Those were 4 very clear answers for me.
Yes. I feel like I kind of know or hope I know what some of those other guys are going to do. Yes, Javonte Jean-Baptiste is obviously he's a question mark because he's been in a starting role. He hasn't had this kind of a role before, being a transfer and all that. So that's a question mark. The other ones there's a pretty big gap between what we talked about and then guys that we didn't, if that makes sense. So those are our X factors, everybody. Stick around. Don't go anywhere because we are going to jump into a mailbag. But before we do, make sure you hit the like button.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Big Ten previews too, man.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. But you can still hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell and share with your family and friends. That'd be great because we still have a little bit more main show, the big show, to get to. So we are going to break down the Big Ten. You and I both went through and we predicted what the Big Ten is going to look like. Both divisions. We did them 1 through 7, both divisions. And then obviously the top 2 play in the Big Ten championship. And, what does that look like?
Right.
We'll talk about that briefly as well.
So what we're going to do is we're actually going to predict the order of finish in both divisions. And then we will kind of focus on who we think are the top contenders for the championships, why we picked the teams that we picked, but then also what the potential stumbling blocks could be for those teams in contention. So we'll talk about 3 from the East, 2 from the West. We'll do our conference champion winner, and then we'll predict whether or not that conference champ will be in the college football playoff. And I'll give you a little bit of hint. My Big Ten champ is in the college football playoff.
Is
in the college football playoff.
I would agree with that, yeah.
So, Vince, let's start in the West. Let's start with that division because I think the East is more fun to talk about. So let's get the West out of the way. I'll give you my 7. And you can give you can give yours as well.
Go ahead.
I'm predicting Iowa to win the West at 10-2.
Okay.
I think both losses will be in conference. I have Wisconsin 2nd.
Okay.
I have Illinois 3rd, but I really am leaning towards wanting to have Illinois higher. I actually like Illinois this year. We'll get into that here in a little bit.
Okay.
I have Nebraska 4, Minnesota 5. I have Minnesota lower than most. And that's more so about really being down on Minnesota than being hyped up about Nebraska. I have Purdue number 6 and then Northwestern number 7. They're going to be one of the worst teams in Power 5 football this year, in my opinion. That is my 1 through 7 for the West. I do think Iowa is the clear best team in the West, but they still have a lot to prove.
Sure.
And that's what we're going to find out. I could see Wisconsin winning it if the transition to the new systems go smoothly. I just don't think that it will. But Illinois is a team, Vince, that could be really interesting to me. So let's talk about these teams. Obviously, what was your 7?
Okay.
And then let's talk about kind of who the true contenders are for the Western Division Championship.
So you might be surprised by this, but I had Iowa first as well. That's not what I think you're going to be surprised about. So I did have Iowa first as well for a lot of the same reasons that you did, and we're going to get into that. You know, I have 2nd place, which I thought maybe I was crazy here, but after hearing you talk, maybe not. I have Illinois 2nd. I have Illinois 2nd. I have Nebraska 3rd. I have Wisconsin 4th. Purdue, Minnesota, Northwestern. And obviously I agree with your Northwestern take. That's why they're at the bottom. I don't have a whole lot of faith in Minnesota. That's why they're 2nd from the bottom. So I kind of did it.
So you had Minnesota behind Purdue?
I do.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I just hate that. I wouldn't hate that at
right.
all.
And it might be wishful thinking
coach
to a degree, and it's only
you
the difference between
admit, Vince, you
5
allow
and
your
6.
personal life
Oh my
and
gosh,
dislike
yes.
from people to impact your
Be the first
rankings.
one to
Yes.
admit that one.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
Yes.
But I have Wisconsin lower than a lot of people, and I know that, and that has nothing to do with my general dislike for Luke Fickell. Like, that really did not play into it. It is an absolute X's and O's reason.
Correct.
I think the drastic change in offensive scheme is going to lose them 2 or 3 games this year. I really do.
And I'm not as high on Tanner Mordecai as others either, Vince. I'm not. Sure. I'm not a believer in Tanner Mordecai. They lost a lot from last year. And I know that they added some guys in the transfer portal, but I don't think their transfer portal pickups were the kind of needle movers that people think they are. They do have a lot coming back in the front 7, which I like, but it's not your typical Wisconsin front 7, which is partly why they struggled last year to me.
Right.
And their secondary replaces some guys. Offensive line-wise, they bring 3 guys back. They've got some decent weapons on the perimeter, but this is a big adjustment they're making. They're going from a pro-style 21 personnel, downhill, under center, shotgun mix type of offense to an air raid. And, to me, I just don't see. Now, I think down the road they could be good because they got a transfer quarterback that as of right now is not projected to start. But if he ever becomes a starter, he could do some things. That's Nick Evers. It's a kid from Texas who originally signed with Florida. When that whole thing happened, he ends up then going to Oklahoma and then transfers to Wisconsin this year to run that offense. So I'm a big fan of Nick Evers. Talent-wise, he's just a little bit raw. He's got some things to work on. But I think that's going to be a tough adjustment for me. And when it comes down to it with Iowa's the team that has the most consistency from last year to this year. And from a coaching standpoint, you do have the same coaches now. In some ways, that's not a good thing. I think with Brian Ferentz, but he is on the hot seat. I think he got a little embarrassed last year. You've got they went 8, but here's the thing, Vince, they went 8-5 last year with an offense that averaged 17.7 points.
Oh my gosh, that offense was historically bad.
And as bad as they were the first half plus the season, where they were 3-4 to start the year and lost 3 in a row to Michigan, Illinois, and Ohio State, got destroyed by Ohio State. They won 5 of their last 6, including a 21-0 beatdown of Kentucky in the bowl game. And so to me, and I look at this team, their defense in the second half of the year at Iowa was just unreal good. Unreal good. They held Purdue to 3 points. Do y'all know how hard that is to hold Purdue to 3?
Because they can move the ball. They can move the football.
The Nebraska game, they gave up 24 points. Vince only gave up 329 yards of offense. It's like they did not give up 400 yards of offense in a single game last year. Not one. Now, Minnesota got close with 399 yards, but they only scored 10 points. That's an outstanding defense. And they did that. Now, they lost some really good defensive players, but I've already pointed this out in the past. Iowa has a very long history of losing really good football players and replacing them the next year with really good football players. Talked about this 2016. Jaleel Johnson is in double figures. The next year he's gone. Josie Jewell and Parker Hess step up with double-figure tackles for loss. They're both gone. The next year, A.J. Epinesa and Anthony Nelson step up with double-figure tackles for loss. Epinesa and Golson were their 2 top guys. The next year, they're gone. Davian Dixon steps up with 13.5 tackles for loss in 8 games. Zach Valkenburg has 8.5 tackles for loss in 8 games. Then Valkenburg steps up the next year because Dick Nixon is gone. Valkenburg steps up the next year with 15 tackles for loss. Then he leaves. And then Deontay Craig and Lucas Van Ness step up the next year with both in double figures of tackles for loss. It's like a different guy every year. They lose Van Ness. They lose Jack Campbell, the linebacker. They lost the cornerback. That's what they got drafted by the Broncos. But there's a lot of talent coming back on that defense. And a lot of veterans. And, of course, they have arguably the best defensive coordinator in college football. The big thing for me, however, is it's the offense. That's it for me, is I think this offense is going to be competent. Now, that may not be a ringing endorsement for Iowa,
but
that's
is
a very ringing endorsement.
It is compared to last year.
A competent offense makes Iowa very hard to beat in the regular season. When you've only got a week to prepare for them, it makes them very hard to beat. As much as we talk trash about the kid that they had last year at quarterback, and he was pretty bad, let's not forget that same quarterback the year before led them to the Big Ten championship game, throwing 10 touchdown passes, 9 in the regular season. They went 10-2 with that kid at quarterback. In the regular season, that kid threw 9 touchdowns and had 6 interceptions. He had minus 109 rushing yards on the year, and they played for the Big Ten championship with a 10-2 record. You're now adding a kid who was a part of a game manager part, but a part of Michigan going to the college football playoff. The jump between Spencer Petras and Cade McNamara is enormous. Now, they lost Sam Laporte at tight end. That's going to sting, but they added Eric All, transfer from Michigan, who's a good football player. They've got some weapons coming back. I really like this Iowa football team. I do. Mm-hmm. I do. And if they make it to the title game this year, they're not going to get worked like they did 2 years ago. They'll be competitive. I don't think they have enough firepower to win the Big Ten.
Agreed.
They would need some breaks to go their way, some turnovers and things like that. They're just not going to go outplay the winner of the East, but they're going to surprise some people. I got them going 10-2, and as long as the offense is competent, they're going to be a really good football team this year. And the schedule, Vince, to me is challenging, but doable. So there's no Ohio State and there's no Michigan this year on their schedule, which helps. Sure. They do have to play at Penn State early. So Iowa State, obviously, on the road. That's a game they need to win. In September 23rd, they play at Penn State. If they can somehow be 3-1 with only losing to Penn State in a competitive game, the rest of the way, very manageable. Michigan State at home should be a win. Purdue at home should be a win. This is the big one, at Wisconsin. That's a big one. Now, right now, I actually have them losing that game. So I have them losing to Penn State and Wisconsin.
Okay.
Then they're home against Minnesota. They play Northwestern at Wrigley. They play Rutgers at home, Illinois at home, and then at Nebraska. That could be for all the marbles in the West. That game at Nebraska could be the big one. Now, with Wisconsin, the reason I still have, even though I have Wisconsin winning the head-to-head because it's at Camp Randall, here's why I have Wisconsin still not winning the division. Because Wisconsin has to play, if you look at their schedule, they have to play Ohio State. They have to play at Illinois. They have to play at Minnesota. And I just see them kind of stubbing their toe somewhere along the line. So, you know, even if they beat Iowa, they still have the next 2 weeks. They play at Illinois and then home against Ohio State. They also play at Minnesota, and obviously they have to play Nebraska as well. So I have a feeling that they're just gonna have that loss that you're just like, that's because they're transitioning to this new system, and so that's kind of how I have them. So that's why I have Iowa winning it.
No, I feel like Iowa, they're good enough to win the West. Right. I think their defense alone is good enough to win the West, and their offense is going to take a step. It can only take a step in the right direction. I don't see how it could be worse. But if they, like you said, if they even have a competent offense, they'll win the West. And I hate to say it, but I feel like they're going to win it going away. Like, I don't feel like it's going to be all that close. That's just me talking. Now, the problem is going to be after they win the West and then they go to the championship, whoever they play against doesn't matter. They're gonna have the same situation that Notre Dame has faced in the past, where they're gonna have a really good defense that wins them a lot of games, but they're not gonna have an offense to win them championships.
Correct.
You know, whether that's conference or otherwise, they're just not gonna have an offense that can score enough points against better than average defenses to win them championships.
Which is the reason why Kirk Ferentz has won multiple West championships in recent seasons, but is yet to be able to actually win the conference championship. And I think they've been in 3, I believe, in the playoff era. They lost to Michigan State that 1 year. I remember that. They lost to Michigan 2 years ago. I think there was a third one. No, there was only the 2.
Okay.
So they had the year in 2015 where they lost to Michigan State. And again, Vince's similar situation. They lost 16-13. Defense did its job. Offense didn't. They got worked by Michigan 2 years ago, but their offense was just abysmal.
Right.
But that's really what it boils down to for me. Is I think this team is going to be the best team in the West because they finished second and first in their division the last 2 years with Spencer Petras at quarterback. You know, I think they're going to be a lot better. Agreed. Wisconsin, again, I'm not a Tanner Mordecai believer. I think that transition is going to be a lot harder than people think it's going to be, and I don't love their overall talent anyway. I think people think this is like a vintage Wisconsin team, and what they're missing is Paul Chryst didn't just have issues with, like, he didn't forget how to coach football.
Right.
He didn't recruit very well. And because him and his staff didn't recruit really well, the further they got away from the previous staffs and it became more about his roster, just wasn't built the way it used to be. And I think that was also something that's not being, I think they just, well, Paul Chryst had a bad year coaching. I think it goes a lot further than that. I just don't think their team is super talented, to be honest with you, which is why I'm going with Wisconsin, because I just still need to see Illinois do it, right? That's the big thing for me, Vince. I need to see Illinois do it. And, can Luke Altmaier be that guy quarterback for them? Can they replace Chase Brown at running back? They're going to have a really salty defense again this year, Vince. We talked about it last year. Remember, Illinois was our sneaky sleeper team in the West last year. And they're my sneaky sleeper team again this year. Not just last year was to finish higher and be better than people thought. And we were kind of right about that. They were better than people thought last year. But I'm actually more so this year now, Vince, saying it's not even about that. It's about, I think they could be, they can end up winning the West. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Illinois wins the West for me. They finished second last year with 4 losses. I think the team that wins the West is going to have at least 2 losses, maybe 3. I could see Illinois being that team, and I am really looking forward to that September matchup where Penn State has to go to Illinois. That is going to be that's going to tell us a lot about both teams, at that point in time in the season. So. The rest of them, to me, there's a big gap after those 3.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. I mean, again, like you kind of gave me the side eye when I have Purdue over Minnesota or whatever.
No, I wasn't disagreeing with you. I just thought I heard you differently.
Yeah,
You're crazy. No, I'm down on Minnesota too.
Second half, like that bottom half of the West is just throw them in a barrel and pull out whoever, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I feel about it, except for the fact that Northwestern is going to be on the bottom. Like that's the only sure thing I think about the West this year is that Northwestern is going to be on the bottom, and I feel like Iowa's going to be on the top. Like that, those are the 2 sure things. How the rest, kind of breaks out. Let's kind of see how it works and how it goes. But I feel very strongly in Iowa, and I feel very strongly in Northwestern. So but again, the West is still the little brother to the East.
Big time. Let's move on to the East, Vince. And let's go. Yes. This time I'll let you go with your first 7.
Okay.
You go with your 7 prediction, and I'll give mine.
So
I'm curious if we're going to be on the same. I know we're not on the same page at 2 and 3.
Correct. And I think there's a big drop off from after 3.
Yes. Yeah. Just give your 7, and I have 2 comments to make about drop offs.
Okay.
But
cool.
Go ahead.
So I've got Ohio State winning it, Michigan 2, Penn State 3. This is where I was kind of like, okay, which direction do I go with the bottom 4? To be honest with you, I ended up going, and this is probably more heart than anything else, but I went Michigan State, IU, Maryland, Rutgers as my bottom 4.
So you had Maryland 6?
I did.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We are definitely off on a lot of these in the West. So I'll go here for East. I'll go here's my East. I go Ohio State 1, Penn State 2, Michigan 3. The reason I have it that way, Vince, is I have them both 10-2 with 2 conference losses, but I have Penn State winning the head-to-head. So that's why because they play each other, and it's at Penn State. I have Maryland 4 because I do like Maryland for that next team. Now there's a big drop off between 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And then to me, there's an even bigger drop off between 4 and the rest of
everybody else.
I have Rutgers actually number 5.
Okay.
I have Michigan State at 6 and then Indiana at 7. Indiana's talent is just not good. And Michigan State losing their quarterback, who wasn't that good to begin with, and Keon Coleman, and that's a tough situation for Michigan State. So I am not high on the Spartans this year, Vince. I think they're going to really struggle. I just don't think they were able to kind of replicate that magic that they had from a couple years ago. Right. Just haven't been able to do it. And then, the thing that hurt them so much about the kids that left was that they left so late. It was after spring ball. I hate the fact that there's a window after spring ball. That should not be the case.
Yeah.
And their schedule does them no favors. They got to play Washington. They got to play at Iowa. They got to play at Ohio State. Then they get Penn State and Michigan, obviously, because it's in the division at home. I would have rather played those 2 teams on the road and got somebody else at home. The Rutgers game at Rutgers is not going to be it's not going to be easy. Maryland at home, not going to be easy. They're going to, I think it's going to be a long year for Coach Tucker and the Spartans this year. Yeah. So I have them 6 and I have Indiana 7.
Okay.
Is how I have it. But there's a big drop between the top 3. And that's the nature of the Big Ten. There's like 3 teams that are better than everybody else. Then there's like that next group of like good programs, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois is now in that. And then there's just like not very good teams. And then there's just absolute garbage at the bottom of the division.
Right. Right.
Like Vanderbilt who we most agree is the worst team in the SEC, would smash, like, in my opinion, most years, like the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten.
Sure.
Like it is. And now that Kansas doesn't suck anymore.
Right.
I mean, Iowa State was the worst team in the Big 12 last year. And didn't they almost beat Iowa State? I mean, it was like 10-7, right? They almost beat Iowa last year, in my opinion. So, actually, I'm sorry. They beat Iowa last year, 10-7. They're the worst team in the Big 12. So the Big Ten is a really good at the top and a bunch of nothing after it. It really is that way to me. And PJ Fleck not being able to step up and lead that program. And you and I talked about this from day one, the whole row the boat thing. It was always about PJ.
Yes. And that's why I don't ever believe in them. I'm sorry. I just don't, man. And again, I do a lot of my picks on emotion, and I do it, but I've never believed in a coach who's all about himself.
Right.
And it's so obvious. There was like a documentary that kind of followed PJ Fleck around and, whatever. And it was just, he's showing off his belt buckle and he's doing, it's just all about him. Yeah. And like the first thing that they did when he moved in is they put all the row the boat crap, all over the place. It's
I don't know what that has to do with Gophers, but whatever.
It's all about him. And that's my biggest problem with him at Minnesota.
Yeah. So let's move on from him. We both think Minnesota's going to struggle this year. Let's talk about our top 3 events. We both have Ohio State at the top. I still think, look, Ohio State is now they got to prove it. Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm not they're definitely going to get back on track. No, they got to prove it. I think they're going to get back on track. I actually don't think they're going to lose a conference game this year. I have them 11-1. I do not have them losing a game in their conference. I think they're going to run the league this year for 2 reasons. Number one is to get Penn State at home. What's that? Can you what?
I said okay.
Okay. Yeah. I thought you were going to say, can I?
Oh, no. I said, okay.
Obviously, I have them losing to Notre Dame. Yes. I think that's going to be their loss. But I think they're going to – I think that's still – it's just a little bit too early for Kyle McCord to really hit his groove, or Devin Brown, whoever wins the starting job. I think that Notre Dame game is going to kind of be the catalyst for Ohio State this year. I think that's going to be something that really helps kind of springboard them. I think it's going to be kind of the wake-up call they need. I think the thing that hurt Ohio State last year, Vince, is that they didn't get the wake-up call they needed, right? Because they beat Notre Dame in the opener, and then after that it was Arkansas State, who stinks, Toledo, Wisconsin, who was bad, Rutgers, Michigan State, who was bad, Iowa. You had the game at Penn State that you kind of pulled away late. You kind of sleptwalked through the Northwestern game. You killed a bad Indiana team. You sleptwalked through the Maryland game. They didn't have that punch in the face, wake up, holy moly, we got to step up and be that team moment like they did in 2014 against Virginia Tech, and that Ohio State's just kind of needed in past years. And so when I look at that team this year, Vince, I think the Ohio State, the Notre Dame game is going to sort of be that moment for them, that kind of catalyst, galvanating thing. Plus, some guys are going to start getting some experience by then.
Sure.
After that, they have Purdue. They have Maryland at home, at Purdue, home against Penn State. I think that's going to be where we really determine who Ohio State is how they get ready for that, because then they go at Wisconsin for a big game. But Penn State just has been able to play Ohio State tough. No team like Michigan has played Ohio State tough recently. And then there was a couple years like in 2016. But Penn State just has consistently played Ohio State tough. They just can't beat them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's going to happen this year in Columbus either. And I just feel like they're going to get back on. I have a hard time coming to the reality of Michigan beating Ohio State 3 straight times. It's certainly possible.
Of course,
certainly possible.
Of course it is.
Yeah, but I just think year 2 of the Jim Knowles era, I have some issues with Michigan that I'm going to get into here a little bit that lead me to it. But I also think there's 2 things that are going to be good for now. Keep in mind the last time that Michigan beat Ohio State 3 times in a row, I was in high school. in my freshman year of college. Like, that's how long ago that was. But it comes down to this.
So was that late 90s?
95 to 97. Okay. So
like
my junior, senior years of high school, and then my freshman year of college.
Yeah. Okay.
And they had some cat named Charles Woodson on that last team.
Yeah, it's pretty good,
by the way. But when I look at Ohio State, two things I think are going to be the reasons for it. I do think the loss to Notre Dame, which I'm predicting, is going to be sort of that early season wake-up call, non-conference wake-up calls. Here's the reality. If their only loss is at Notre Dame and they run the table, they're clearly in the playoff. Like, very much deservedly in the playoff.
For sure.
Unless the Notre Dame game is a blowout, and I don't anticipate it being a blowout. I mean, could it happen? I guess. I mean, breaks go weird and some weird, sure. But that would be the ultimate homer take of all homer takes to say. I think Notre Dame wins because they're at home. They're more experienced. They have the better quarterback. And I don't know that Notre Dame has been able to say that against Ohio State in a very long time. So that's kind of why I have it. But that loss and the fact that they don't have a first-round draft pick at quarterback is eventually going to be the best thing for Ohio State. And I think by November, this is going to be a really, really dangerous football team. Really dangerous football team. Because I think it's going to force them to be more balanced. I think the thing that's going to hurt them against Notre Dame and early in the season is their offensive line is a patchwork unit right now. I'm having buddies text me talking about like one of their freshmen might start this year. That could be a problem against Notre Dame. But I think by the time they kind of get into that Penn State, Wisconsin back-to-back, which is in October, I think they're going to have at least been able to figure it out enough to where the offensive line is going to start playing better. The run game's really going to take off, and they're going to be a more balanced team. The other factor is I just think by the time we get to November, this defense is going to be playing at a very high level. They've got talent.
Sure.
It's just, okay, that's when the light goes on of, hey, we've kind of figured this defense out. So that's where I'm at with Ohio State. I have them as the team to beat in the West, in the East. I think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're incredibly talented. I think that it may take them a little bit to get rolling, just like the 14 title team. But if you remember that year, Vince, in 14, by the time we got to November, that team was unreal good, man. I mean, they looked so bad. It's very rare that you see a team like USC kind of went through this in 2016, but they had 4 losses. But I can't tell you if I've ever seen a team look that bad in their first 2 games and really looked kind of sloppy, big chunk of the year, be that dominant down the stretch. I mean, they beat Navy 34-17 in a game that was pretty competitive. They beat Cincinnati convincingly, but Cincinnati wasn't that good. They gave up 28 points, gave up 24 to Maryland. Played a bad Rutgers team, only beat Penn State by a touchdown. But that Penn State game gave them some confidence. They blew out Illinois the next week. They blew out number 5 Michigan State on the road. It was 49-37, but it wasn't that close, if you remember. Then they had some tough wins over Minnesota, Indiana. They had a 14-point win over Michigan. And then they beat Wisconsin 59-0 in the Big Ten title game. Then they went on to beat Bama and Oregon to win the title. I kind of see – I'm not saying they're going to win the title. I kind of see a similar thing here, where they're not going to look like a vintage Ohio State team in September and even early October, which is going to have people, oh no, Ryan Day, blah 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 blah.
Oh yeah.
But I think by the time we get to November, they'll have
changed.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think what we're going to see by November, Vince, is we're going to see a team that the light has kind of gone on a little bit for them. I think the Penn State victory that I'm predicting they're going to win on October 21st. Followed by a road victory at Wisconsin, is then going to be like, okay, yeah, this team's pretty good. And then they've got Rutgers, Michigan State, and Minnesota before then. But the thing about it is, I think that early loss for this Ohio State team is going to be the catalyst that the Oregon game was not for them 2 years ago. In that they're going to know, hey guys, we're in single elimination mode now. We're in survive and advance mode now. We can't afford another loss. It's going to prevent them from getting sort of I think they just kind of got overconfident last year. Like, we're just playing all these bad teams. And they just got complacent. That's what I'm looking for, complacent. They just thought they're going to roll the balls out and get their payback against Michigan. And they realized, we can't do that.
In the mouth.
And I think if they have a loss this year, and it's kind of like, well, if we are going to get to where we want to get to, we can't lose again. I think that's going to kind of zero Ohio State in a way that they haven't had. And I think it's going to force them to kind of become a more balanced football team. So that's why I have Ohio State number 1. Do you see it differently?
The biggest question mark for Ohio State for me is obviously lack of experience at the quarterback position. I mean, and that's why I like the fact that Notre Dame's playing them early in the season.
Correct.
No doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt.
Just like Oregon does not beat them in November in 2021.
Exactly.
Once CJ Stroud had, because to your point, Vince, CJ Stroud played one more snap in 2020 than what Steve Angeli played last year for Notre Dame as a true freshman.
There you go.
Threw 0 passes as a freshman in 2020.
Right. So, I mean, that's the biggest question mark for this Ohio State team. And then some secondary question marks would be year 2 of Jim Knowles. What does that look like? But I've got a lot of confidence that it's going to look pretty stinking good. And so, that becomes less and less of a question mark as the season goes on. And obviously Notre Dame's going to be playing them in Notre Dame's week 5, but Ohio State's week 4, right? If I'm doing the math right.
Yes, week 4 for Ohio State, game 5. So it's game 4 for Ohio State. It's game 5 for Notre Dame.
Right.
So Notre Dame will have a week of practice plus an NC State game as sort of a get them ready for that, which Ohio State won't have. They've got Youngstown, Indiana, and Western Kentucky.
Right. So this is Ohio. Notre Dame's going to be Ohio State's first test, just like it was last year because it was the first game of the season.
Correct.
And as the chat is going off over here, they're talking about if Sam Hartman was the quarterback last year at Notre Dame.
Doesn't matter. He wasn't. They lost.
I totally get that, but I have confidence in that and all, whatever. So, but we're not talking about Notre Dame versus Ohio State. We're talking about Ohio State in the Big Ten.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I still think that they are the class of the Big Ten, regardless of their quarterback questions, because they're going to feast off of the bottom part of this division. And when it comes time to play Michigan, look, I will say right now, I will be absolutely floored if we get a third installment of Michigan, Ohio State that we've had the last 2 years. I was shocked it happened twice, to be honest with you. And
that's what gives me a little bit of pause. I mean, I was dogmatic that Ohio State would stomp Michigan.
Oh, they're having it at home. I mean, there was no way they were going to lose to Michigan.
I was more pissed off at how Michigan talked about Ohio State than Ohio State was, apparently.
Yes, 100%.
The players and coaches, it would seem.
100%.
Yeah.
So I was shocked, and I will be even more shocked if the same thing happens again year 3. I just don't see it happening. I'm sorry. I just don't. So if they can take care of Michigan, they're going to be the class of the Big Ten. I mean, it really does come down to, yes, the Penn State game. It's a huge game. I believe Ohio State's hosting it, so I have less worries about that. I always feel like, at least recently, Penn State has been more hype than substance. They've got some pieces. Don't get me wrong, but I have zero faith in Franklin to put those pieces in the right places on game day.
I get all that. Here's my only caveat to that. Why I think this game could be more dangerous for Ohio State than maybe we think. You and I have the same opinion of James Franklin. But whatever your opinion of James Franklin is, you have to be willing to admit one thing. He can get his teams ready to play Ohio State. Now, he's lost some games because they make some dumb in-game decisions against Ohio State, like the 4th and 5 draw play and all that. But even when they're not good, I mean, last year they lost by 13. It was a much closer game than 13. The year before they lost by 9. The year before that, they lost by 13. That was a COVID year, competitive game. Ohio State beat them 28-17 the year before that. It was 27-26 the year before that, 39-38 the year before that. Penn State beat Ohio State the year before that. So they just have some confidence against Ohio State. But to your point, I just don't have the faith that James Franklin is going to be able to make the right decisions in game for them to win that game in Columbus. Is it doable? Sure. Right. But what makes me even less confident in it is you're going to need Drew Aller to win you that game. As much as I love their running backs, and they are arguably the best backfield in the country, at least I don't think they're the best backfield in the country because I think there's a drop-off between 1 and 2 and then everybody else because of some guys that left this offseason. But it's a very good backfield, very good backfields. And Nicholas Singleton is going to have a chance to be the best running back in college football this year. Has a chance. The difference is you know who else knows that? Jim Knowles in Ohio State, and they're going to say, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to attack. We're going to blitz. We're going to do this. We're going to make you beat us with your quarterback, and I don't think Drew Aller's in a position to do that just yet at Columbus. That's my big thing. Now, I do think Drew Allar's going to get that big win the next week, Vince. And to your point about Penn State being more substance or more hype than they are substance, I actually think they have a lot of substance. I don't think they utilize that. So I think they underachieve. Penn State, to me, constantly has more talent than their record should dictate. Last year, I thought they benefited from a somewhat soft schedule that they won't have this year. But I really like this Penn State team. I do. They're going to be in year 2 of Manny Diaz's defense. I'm not a huge Manny Diaz fan, but it is, again, year 2 of their defense. I think they have some really talented front 7 players. You've got some, even though you've got some new faces at defensive tackle from a starting standpoint, those are guys that have played in past years. I like their front 7. Losing Joey Porter Jr. stings. They lost a safety, good player, but they also have Kalen King coming back. They recruit that position secondary very well. I think that the big thing for me is watching Phil Troutwine finally get the offensive line going last year was something for me. And what kind of woke me up to that, you know what? Penn State might have turned the corner. And so that's why they're a dark horse for me to win this division. Because when I watched them go against Utah, now again, Utah lost Cam Rising, but even before Utah lost Cam Rising, watching Penn State physically go toe-to-toe with Utah was something that was like, okay, this is a little different than what we've seen from Penn State in the past, where you can kind of punch them in the mouth and they couldn't out-athlete you and they couldn't win games. They physically battled Utah. And I was impressed by that, right? I don't care about the outcome as much because it's a bowl game. Cameron Rising got hurt, all that. But just the physicality that I saw, to me, from them last year showed me a little bit of something, Vince. And here's something else that showed me something. They got embarrassed by Michigan. They choked the game away against Ohio State. They destroyed the rest of their opponents the rest of the way. Now, they weren't very good, but they destroyed them. They beat Indiana 45-14. They beat a Maryland team that gave Ohio State everything it could handle, I think, the next week, 30-0. They beat Rutgers 55-10, and then they blew out Michigan State 35-16. Now, you can say, well, that's, it's not overly impressive, but yeah, it kind of is because they did what they needed to do, and they showed some mental toughness. So why do I have them over Michigan? It really comes down to schedule, Vince. For me, it does. I have they play West Virginia at home, Delaware at home, at Illinois. That game is going to define their season to me. If they can, and that's a game, if I'm Penn State, that is a survive and advance game, dude. That is I don't care if they win by a point. I don't care if it's 10-9. Sure. Get out of Champaign with a W. That's all that matters. But even if they lose, I can still see them going 10-2 because I actually have them. Here's the thing, Vince. I actually have them losing that game. I have Penn State losing that game. And then I have them losing so then they play Iowa at home, at Northwestern, UMass at home. Then they go to Columbus. I have them losing that game. Then they're Indiana at home, at Maryland, and then home against Michigan at noon, and then Rutgers at Michigan State. Comes down to this. I think they're going to beat Michigan. I think they're going to lose to Ohio State and beat Michigan. And that's why I have them losing. And then, of course, I have Ohio State beating Michigan. So I have them both having 2 conference losses, but because Penn State wins the head-to-head, that's why I have Penn State being number 2. But I could see Penn State pulling off an upset this season. Now, because here's the path to Penn State. They've got to either figure out a way to beat Ohio State, which they just haven't really done. But if you lose that game, you got to beat Illinois and you got to beat Michigan. And then you got to cross your fingers and pray that Wisconsin can knock off Ohio State. And that Michigan, because see, here's what, if Wisconsin can knock off Ohio State, if you lose to them, if Wisconsin beats them the next week and then Michigan beats Ohio State, Penn State wins the Big Ten West because they'd have the head-to-head win over Michigan. They'd both be 1 loss. They'd have the head-to-head win. I just don't see there being 2 losses on Ohio State's in-conference docket this year. I could see them losing 2 games, Vince, Notre Dame and maybe at Michigan, but I just don't see them losing 2 conference games this year. I just don't. And unless Penn State can figure out a way to beat them, I think they're going to finish second. But they are a dark horse to have some things go their way that they win it. That's the thing for me, Vince.
Okay.
So you have Michigan 2.
And Penn State 3.
Is it just about your lack of faith in
It's my so when I say substance, when I say lack of substance, it's not the lack of the talent of the players, because I feel like Penn State has done a really good job of recruiting. I mean, we've documented that when we talk about recruiting all the time. I mean, there's plenty of names on that roster that Notre Dame would love to have on their roster. I mean, those are facts, right? So when I talk about substance, it's the whole package. It's the game day package that Penn State presents, and that has to do with the head coach. And, you still have to be able to move the pieces where you need the pieces to be moved, and it has to be in a successful manner. They can whoop up on the bottom end of the Big Ten and get all kinds of victories and all of that.
Yeah, Penn State, right?
Penn State, yeah. Talking about Penn State. And I don't have their schedule in front of me. I was listening to you pull it up or talk about it. You said they go to Iowa?
No, they get Iowa at home the week after they play Illinois. So they're at Illinois. Okay. Then
that's a tough stretch. That's a tough stretch right there.
I can see Iowa winning that game.
Then there you go. I trust Kirk Ferentz over James Franklin. Now, Kirk Ferentz doesn't have the roster that James Franklin has, and it's a home game for Penn State. So I'm sure that Penn State is going to be favored in that, especially if they go on the road and beat Illinois, right? That's a tough little stretch right there.
Yeah.
And so
and Vince, Iowa has beaten Penn State the last two times they've played in 21 and 20.
So they got their number.
Right.
So
I mean, Penn State won like 6 before that.
Sure.
Right. The point is Iowa's not going to be intimidated by Penn State.
Exactly.
I still just don't think Iowa has enough horses. But here's the thing, Vince, to your point. The recipe for Penn State to beat Iowa is going to be the same as it is to beat Ohio State, which is you're going to need Drew Aller to win you that game against that Iowa defense.
Right.
The problem is I just don't trust Iowa's offense to score more than 10 points. I can see Drew Aller leading them to 16 points and a win. That's the problem.
Maybe last year's Iowa offense. Come on, baby. Come on, Iowa offense. Like, I just need you to be serviceable. Serviceable's averaging 28, baby. Come on.
Right.
I need you to do something for me in the big whiteout or whatever they're going to have when Iowa comes to town. But that's my. It's kind of a toss up between the two, and I hate to say this out loud because it kind of tastes like acid coming out of my mouth. I trust Michigan more than I do Penn State.
How can you not after the last 2 years?
Right.
I mean, how can you not?
Absolutely. And so that's until Penn State proves me otherwise, then I've got to have Michigan ahead of Penn State.
Well, so if you want to talk about proving something to me, that's they have done that against Michigan. Yes, okay. Michigan has beaten them recently, but Penn State has got plenty of wins in James Franklin over Michigan. And they also have one including Ann Arbor. I mean, last year that game got out of hand. It was, I think Penn State was winning at halftime, or it was very close at halftime. I'm actually going to look that up. It was a very competitive game at halftime, but it was kind of like that 14 game with Michigan and Ohio State when Michigan was losing like 13-10 at halftime. But I remember a buddy of mine was like, "What are your thoughts on this game?" And I was like, "It's not nearly as close as 13-10. Ohio State's going to run them off the field in the second half." Right. And that's exactly what they did. I think it was Harbaugh's first year. It ended up being like 42-13 or something like that. And you just like at halftime, you just knew it was like when Michigan State played Bama and it was like 7-0 at halftime in the playoff. And you're like, it ain't a 7-0 game, man. Bama's dominating this game. And they win 38-0. But when you look at that game last season, Michigan was clearly the better team. It was 16-14 Penn State or Michigan. Michigan kicked the field goal with 2 seconds left in the second quarter to go up 16-14. But like Penn State got a touchdown off of an interception. Like they weren't really moving the ball against Michigan. And then Penn State took an early third quarter lead. Then Michigan went right down the field 4 plays and then just ran them off the field and scored it'd be 25 unanswered points in the second half. But Penn State has also got some big wins over Michigan. The Penn State lost in 2021 by 4. That was a really bad Penn State team that lost to a playoff team and only lost by 4. The last time they played in State College, Penn State won 28-21. And then the time before that they played in State College in 2017, Penn State blew them out 42-13. So they've gotten plenty of wins. Since 2010, they've got 4 wins over Michigan in State College. They're 4-2 against Michigan in State College. And so that is a game that they have shown that they can beat Michigan in State College. They almost beat Michigan in State College 2 years ago, and that was a 7-6 Penn State team.
Right.
So it's a little different than their rivalry against Ohio State, because before this 2-game losing streak that they currently have against Michigan, they had won 3 out of 4 against Harbaugh. So, I think that they have shown it. And it basically, what my prediction for that game this year, Vince, was going to be who's the home team.
Okay.
Like if this was at Michigan, I'd be saying something completely different. I'd be picking Michigan to win the game. But I'm going with Penn State because I like their talent. I think getting the transfer from Kent State was big. I would have Dante Cephas. I would have taken him at Notre Dame in a heartbeat as a transfer this offseason. So I think that'll help them in the pass game. I just really like their ability to run the football. I like their line, and I think they got a really athletic defense, and so that's why I'm going there. And here's the other thing for Michigan for me, Vince. I'm just not – I thought last year's Michigan team – and this is going to sound really, really kind of petty and because
I'm all for it.
I hate Michigan and all that. It's really not. It's really not that. For me, when I looked at that Michigan team last year, it's like they were one of the least impressive, really good teams I've ever seen. Because you just kept watching them. They'd win these games convincingly, and you're just like, it's just ugly. It's like they're not even that good. And then they play TCU, and they get ripped up by TCU, and it just it's like the Illinois game. Illinois got screwed in that game. It's absolutely screwed in that game. They didn't play. They played really sloppy against Maryland. If Iowa had any kind of offense last year, they could have beat Michigan last year. I mean, any kind of offense whatsoever. I just look at it, Vince. They've lost a lot of talent the last 2 years. I don't love their front seven compared to what it was 2 years ago or even last year. They've lost 3 first-round draft picks off their D-line, and they went through a stretch, COVID and beyond, where their recruiting was kind of mediocre up until this past year, and this is the year it starts to hurt them, in my opinion. They got some really good talented transfers in the O-line. Their O-line's still going to be very good, but they're mixing in 3 new starters. It's a little different animal this year, where last year was like just plugging the center in. Now there's going to be 3 new starters in the offensive line, potentially, as transfers. I don't love their receiving core. It's not super talented. I think losing DJ Turner is going to hurt them a lot more. You know who right now is projected to be their starting corner? I believe it's still Amorian Walker.
Really?
The kid that was committed there and play receiver.
Yep.
I just have these visions of Amorian Walker trying to cover Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., and it just ain't going to work. And I don't think they're good enough in the front seven now after losing Hutchinson and Ajabo the year before and now losing Mozzie Smith. I just don't think they have the same horses that they did. And I think that they're going to get exposed a little bit. And I love the talent at running back. I think J.J. McCarthy is a scrambler. I think he's very overrated as a passer. I saw one of the most absurd comments the other day from a former college quarterback. I think it was Jordan Rodgers. Said he's the most talented quarterback in college football. No, he said that about Joe Milton. Who was it that said J.J.
Joe
McCarthy
Milton was? No, it was Jim Harbaugh. He said that he's the best quarterback that he's ever had, and he can't remember having anybody any better or something along those lines.
Some national guy that had something about J.J. McCarthy that was just absurd. Okay. And you're just like, and then Ryan had the comment on Twitter the other day that just sent all the Michigan people out of their minds. He said, stated fact, Drew Pine is that J.J. McCarthy threw as many touchdown passes last year as Drew Pine.
And Michigan fans just lost. I remember seeing that back and forth between him and it's like, hey, that's just a fact. I mean, it was,
you can take it however you want. And he played 15 games.
Right.
Drew Pine started 9, 10, right, last year. Didn't even play in the bowl game.
Right.
So, yes, you are correct. But, Jordan Rodgers said about Joe Milton. Somebody else said something recently about J.J. McCarthy, and I just was like, wow, that's just the hype on that is just crazy.
Oh.
And so I just think that they're gonna take that little step back this year, Vince. Now, they're still going to be very good. I have them going 10-2, but they're not going to be as good as their final record because their schedule is embarrassingly soft.
Right.
It is embarrassingly soft.
Michigan's schedule is embarrassingly soft. Oh, my goodness gracious.
It is really bad. But I still think and I think it's going to look a lot like the 2016 season, Vince. That's exactly how I see it playing out. They're going to be 9-0 and rolling into November, just like they were. You remember that year in 2016, Vince? I think they ended up getting up to, I think, number 2 in the country. Let me pull that up. They climbed up. They were all the way to number 3. They were 9-0. They had just beaten Maryland 59-3. They had beaten Michigan State on the road. They had a win over Wisconsin. They beat Penn State early in the year 49-10. If you remember, that was a Penn State team that ended up winning the Big Ten championship. They beat Colorado 45-28 in a year where Colorado played for the Big 12 championship or Pac-12 championship. blew out Illinois 41-8, and then they went on the road to Iowa, and Iowa beat them. And then the next week they came back, had a sloppy win over Indiana, and then the next week Ohio State beat them in overtime, double overtime. And I think it's going to go the exact same way. I think they're going to lose to Penn State, beat who they have coming up in between. So it's Penn State. That's how it works. It's Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State is how their season's going to end.
Okay.
I think they're going to lose to Penn State, sneak by Maryland, who's given Michigan some problems in recent years, and then lose to Ohio State. That's how I see the season playing out.
Okay.
I think they're going to get their revenge on the road is where I think it's going to be for Ohio State. So, and if he says he's the best quarterback he's ever had, I laugh at that because I'm like,
pretty sure it was something along those lines.
You had Andrew Luck, bro. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But that's just kind of my takeaway why I have Ohio State beating that team, Vince. And I don't think there's anybody else that's going to challenge the big three in that division.
Nope, not a chance. There's a huge drop off at that point. The bottom four was just like, okay, again, shake them up, throw them out. I don't really care what order they come in because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, and I don't see any one of those bottom four. I mean, could it be, a situation like when Purdue beat Ohio State, that kind of a thing? Could one of those guys like jump up, get just a victory that no one saw coming, like one of those kinds of situations where they actually have an effect on the final standings and the whoever is going to go to the Big Ten championship and stuff like that? Sure, that it's college football. It's one of the reasons we love college football. It's definitely a possibility, but I can't sit here and predict that one of those four teams is going to jump up and bite one of the top three. That's not a logical take.
So, Vince, I agree. Yeah. Title game, Ohio State versus Iowa. We both agree on that. And then Ohio State wins.
Yeah.
And then I do predict that Ohio State will then go into the college football playoff.
Yes.
At 11-1 in the regular season, go 12-1
conference champion.
Yep. Only losses in September
right.
to what I think is going to be a very good Notre Dame team, who I also have predicted is going to be in the college football playoff. So you've got two of my playoff picks now, folks. You got two of them now. So Ohio State's in, Notre Dame is in, and there will not be a rematch in the first semifinal. So let's leave it at that. All right, so that's it, Vince. That's going to do it for our Big Ten predictions.
There it is.
Go ahead and clear us out of here, and then we'll head over to the mailbag and get to a few questions here before we roll out.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you get your mailbag questions in. But before you do, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with your family and friends, leave us a 5-star review, and, leave a little comment in there. A positive one would be nice, but hey, we're always looking to improve as well. So go ahead and leave a comment, 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. Make sure you hit boards.irishbreakdown.com. All kinds of great stuff on there. We're only 10 away from our goal, so make sure you jump in. Be the one that puts us over the top. Be that one, all right? That could be big for you. It could be big for you. You get a good night's sleep after you find out that that's who you are. So jump on. There's always a great amount of intel, great conversation going over there at the board. So, and then, by the way, the merch store, hit it up. Make sure you got your gear for the season. I love walking through the tailgate area from the way back where they have the media park and seeing IB merch, baby. And just, you lock eyes with somebody and you're just like, it's like, if you know, like that's what it is. So make sure you get your IB merch and wear it over to the stadium because we love to see it. So for Brian, I'm Vince. Thanks for joining us on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Okay, everybody, it's mailbag time. Get those mailbag questions in. Put a little MB in front of your question or the little emoji of the mailbox so we can see it very, very easily. First up, leading off, Raymond with the super chat. Glad to see you're doing better, Brian. Hello, Vince. Go Irish.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was a super sticker from Tim Opal, one of my former players.
No kidding.
Sticker. Yeah,
I've heard you bring up that name before, actually. Thanks, Tim.
Tim's a good dude.
Is that your what logo is that? Was that your?
That
college?
was not from no.
Okay,
that's probably from like local high school or something.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
All right, Rob Osgood. One of my X factors is the passing game among running backs. With the talent of the wide receivers and the quarterback who isn't scared to throw it, I see huge gains against opposing linebackers. Notre Dame running backs' speed is an X factor. This is a good point, Brian.
Really, the last part for sure. I mean, look, Vince, we've talked. How many times did you and I complain? Just throw it to the running back. Just throw the check down. He's
wide open. You're going to get 20 yards without being touched.
I don't know if teams are going to still defend him that way this year. I don't know, but yeah.
And they've been practicing throwing the ball to running backs. I'll say that without saying anything else. I feel good about it.
There's
They
different
have good
ways
hands.
of getting them the football is
Right.
what we're comfortable saying.
Running backs have good hands, and I hope that they use that to their advantage.
Yeah. Yep. Well, they'll use the other. You mean the staff? You hope the staff.
The staff. Yes.
I got you.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Yep. Raymond, is Tyree as fast as Rocket?
No. Chris Tyree's really fast. And he's a 4.3 guy, legit 4.3 guy.
Sure.
Rocket was a legit 4.2-ish guy. High 4.2 guy. So no, he's not as fast. And he doesn't play as fast either. Not even just track-wise, but he didn't play as fast. Rocket played every bit as fast as the 4.2. Yeah. Here's an interesting take, Vince.
From Bernie, Merriweather looks like he would absolutely cook Tyree in a race.
That not even close.
No.
I don't have a clue what you're talking about here.
No.
You can say, hey, Chris Tyree doesn't make people miss. He gets, but if you're going to say a race, you like guys do remember this is a kid that has 2 90+ yard touch. Like, for all the crap some fans give Chris Tyree, can we not forget he has 4 touchdowns of over 50 yards in his career? He's got 2 90+ yard touchdowns in his career. Tobias Merriweather has 1 catch, and I'm as high on Tobias Merriweather as anybody. But there's a lot of things he does well. Outrun Chris Tyree ain't one of them.
Nope.
There's only one guy on this football team that could beat Chris Tyree in a race. One, maybe, and that's Micah Bell. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. That's the list. And that's the end of the list, right? If everybody's healthy, that's the only dude on the football team that can beat Chris Tyree in a race. And it's not really that close. Like, nobody else really comes close to him. Chris Tyree at his speed, and a guy like Christian Gray, who supposedly runs like a low 4.4, that's several steps in a 40-yard dash, Vince. With what Chris
40-yard. Can I just tell people who haven't stepped foot on a football field, and this isn't like putting anybody down, when you actually walk a 40-yard dash or run it, however, it's a lot longer than you think. And when you're talking about mid-4s, 4 seconds to get to cross that kind of terrain, it is a long distance. I'm just being honest with you. At least it always feels that way to me when I walk out onto a football field. Like, oh, wow, that's 40 yards. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. Now, about the only way that you're ever going to even come remotely think that he could beat Tobias, or Tobias could beat Chris Tyree in a race, is if you wanted to go all the way out to 400.
Like a lap.
That's
400 meters.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like, make it a longer race, because Tyree has a faster 40 time than Tobias. He's got a faster 100-meter dash time than Tobias. Tobias's fastest 40 time is 10.9. Chris's was a 10.6, and he did that as a sophomore. Stopped running 100-meter dash after that. And he had, as I said before, he had 2 years in a row. Chris Tyree was the fastest track guy in the nation in the 55-meter dash. Not fastest football player, fastest player in the nation for his grade in the 55-meter dash. His fastest 200-meter dash time was a 21.57. He did that as a sophomore. Tobias Merriweather, as a senior, set his best 200-meter time, which is 21.28. Now, where Tobias had the better time is the 400. He had a 52.45. Chris Tyree's best was 54.59. He only ran that like once. But yes, any kind of 200-meter or less, or I'd say 100-meter or less, he is not touching Chris Tyree. And this is coming from the biggest Tobias Merriweather hype guy in the country, right? So, no, that's not no.
Bernie is a very glasses half full person. And I give Bernie a
Bernie's
lot of credit.
Glass is 99% full, and I don't understand. But that one's like,
he's very
that's two Notre Dame guys. So I don't understand the why you would even why you would even look at that and be like, think that that's something to even discuss.
Oh, it's so great though. All right, from Brandon. How would you feel about 25 safety haul of Jadon Blair, Ethan Long, and Ivan Taylor? Is that gap closing? Who could be the strong safety in that group, or does it matter?
Well, last part first, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Notre Dame likes to have their safeties as interchangeable as possible. Now, to your point, however, there needs to be at least one safety that you think that can come down and defend the run. And I think Ethan Long is a very good tackler. I think Jadon Blair will be a really good tackler when he learns to play a little bit better leverage. But I think Ethan Long is a very good tackler who could be an alley guy, especially as he fills out. To your first part of your question, is that a gap closing safety class? Heck yes. I mean, you're talking about with Jadon Blair and Ivan Taylor, you're talking about two guys that are ranked as top 50 players in the country, I believe, by at least one service, both of them. I know that On3 has Jadon Blair, I think, at number 26. I'm looking at that now. Yes, they have him at number 26. And this just shows how just crazy the rankings are right now, Vince, and why it's getting so much harder to pay any attention to him. They have him at number 26 in the country nationally, number 2 safety in the country. All the other services have him as a 3-star.
Of course.
I have no clue what they're looking at. Ivan Taylor is ranked as a top 40 player by both ESPN and 247 Sports, and he's a consensus top 4-star player. And then Ethan Long, to me, is also a 4-star player and probably about top 200, 250 now, because but I think there's another jump in athleticism not athleticism, because he's a pretty good athlete. There's another jump in explosiveness that's going to come with Ethan Long. And he had a stat. His high school claims that he didn't allow a single reception in 2010.
Jeez.
Now, in 2022 as a sophomore. Part of the reason is because as a true freshman, he had 11 breakups and 8 interceptions. So yeah, I get why people stopped throwing at him in that league. I get why people stopped throwing at him.
Right.
He's a very good football player. That would be one of Notre Dame's best safety classes since I've been following the team. That would be an outstanding safety class. A year after you added Bronte Johnson, yeah, that would completely restore the safety depth chart, in my opinion, Vince. Absolutely.
Tyler Evans with the super chat. Thank you so much. Tyler, in your opinion, what is the most intriguing quarterback battle this year and who wins it?
That's a good question. I mean, I'd probably, Vince, have to go with Bama.
That's the most intriguing to me just because of the situation, right?
Yeah.
From Tommy Rees to Tyler Buckner, the whole So personally, that's the most intriguing. I don't know if that's the most intriguing nationwide.
Like Ohio State's quarterback battle to me isn't intriguing because it's kind of like it doesn't matter who wins it. Whoever wins it's going to put up really good numbers. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the Ohio State offense. And they're both talented kids.
Yeah.
I don't love the talent in the Alabama quarterback room as much. I'm not as big on Ty Simpson as other people. Jalen Milroe's not a quarterback in a pro-style system. Tyler Buckner's talented, but he's started 3 games in his career, and he's been injured a lot. And he's making a San Diego private school kid that went to University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, is now in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I don't know how that's going to go. I hope it goes well. I hope Tyler does great this year. I love Tyler Buckner.
Sure.
I just don't have a lot of faith in right now that we just don't know who he is because he's missed so much development time. And then getting used to new teammates, I hope he does well, but that's an intriguing one because I don't have a lot of faith that whoever wins that battle is going to just step in and produce.
Right.
It's just, because it's a new offense. We don't know what kind of offense Tom Rees is going to have at Bama. We have no idea what that offense is going to look like. There's a lot of uncertainty about that, Vince. A lot of people talking about Bama's this and Bama's that, and Bama could be really, really good, but this is the biggest question mark that I've had about Bama in a long time, and a lot of it comes down to this right here. It's their quarterback position.
Agreed.
And if it's bad enough, this could be the year that Bama finally falls back to earth. So those are really the main ones for me. I don't know that there's a lot of other quarterback battles to me that are super, super intriguing. I mean, we know who the quarterback is going to be at Georgia, right? We know who the quarterback is going to be at Clemson. It's not really a battle. You look at a lot of the top teams, Vince, I don't know of a lot of other battles that are really, Quinn Ewers has won that job already. Michigan doesn't have a quarterback battle. There's talk of a quarterback battle at Penn State. I don't buy it. I think that's just more about trying to take some of the pressure off of Drew Aller. Is really all I see. There just aren't a lot of other quarterback battles that I really find overly intriguing.
Somebody said Ole Miss, there's a quarterback battle, but like,
yeah, but I don't think that's really
okay,
intriguing. I mean,
like that's not
they
intriguing to
got
me. Yeah.
Jackson Dart from last year. They brought in Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. I mean, that'll be a battle, but I don't find that overly. And I don't think Ole Miss is going to be a title contender this year. I don't think there's a battle at Tennessee. There's not a battle at LSU. You know, maybe you could argue there should be just because of how well Nussmeier played, but I think Jaden Daniels played well enough last year to be the guy. So I don't know that there's a lot of other really there's a lot of quarterback battles. There always are, but none that really intrigue me anywhere close to. It's Bama 1, Ohio State 2 are the two for me.
Sure.
And the only reason Ohio State one is intriguing is, does anybody win it?
Or is it just like default?
Yeah, that's the key. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen. This isn't a negative comment. It's just, it's true that it's what we claim of every position battle. Somebody's got to start. Is that guy starting because of the two guys that struggled? He was the one that struggled the least,
right?
Or does this guy seize hold of it? And that's what Ohio State's are going to look for. We don't know what's going to be. They start camp today,
right?
So
exactly.
Like people keep asking, how's Buckner looking in practice today? So I don't know. I'll let you know after the first practice, which is today. Like they just started camp today, because the mistake that I think people make is, well, Notre Dame started a week ago, but remember Notre Dame's first game is in week 0. So it's
right.
It's
There's only,
and I don't know why they call it that way. I mean, it's stupid. It should be
so
week
stupid.
1 is the first game. Week of games is dumb. But
100%.
week 1 is technically, what is it, like September 2nd?
It's Labor Day weekend. It's Labor Day weekend.
So it's the previous weekend. Notre Dame plays August 26th. So it's technically called week 0. So they started a week earlier than everybody else. Most teams are starting practice this week.
Right.
Is when most teams are starting practice.
I think that Ohio State, Bama, I think they all start like today. So
today, yeah. Bama definitely starts today. I think Ohio State starts today as well, I believe.
Yeah. I think that's what Archer said the other day in the chat, that they start Thursday, because somebody was talking about somebody getting hurt at Ohio State practice. He's like, they haven't even practiced yet.
Well, I mean, that could have been a workout.
Sure, it could have been.
The guy read the name wrong. It was somebody for the I think the Bengals that got hurt, whose first name was Travion and but different last name, and that was the confusion.
But ran with it. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But he owned it. He was like, my bad, I read it wrong. It was all good.
That's right. I remember that now.
We already got that together. Yeah.
All right. Irish Blooded, as a film and process buff, who is your favorite Notre Dame player to just watch?
Like currently? Let's go currently and in the past. Like currently, my favorite guy to watch right now. I'm a quarterback guy and all that, but my favorite guys to watch usually when I'm just talking about film, Vince, or linemen.
100%.
I love watching a great lineman. So currently it's much. Joe Walt.
Yeah.
All time. I mean, just watching Quentin Nelson's film in 2017 was just like, it was silly.
Just sit back and smile.
Yeah.
You know?
He was fun to watch. He was really fun to watch.
And that, because I don't want this to come off wrong, but it will, and that's fine. Because I enjoy watching good quarterback play too. Notre Dame hasn't had good quarterback play in a while, so I enjoy watching linemen. I hate to give the exact same answer, but my last few years of coaching, I was in the lineman room all the time, and I really learned a lot about line play and coaching up linemen and what to look for watching film from linemen. And I just enjoy it. Like I feel very, how do I want to say this? There's nothing better than watching good line play, because it just makes everything else work. Mm-hmm. And so that is why I just enjoy it. And, you're right. Watching Q play was just pure joy. It was just pure joy. And watching him just make other guys wish they didn't elect to play football that week. Like, that was just so much fun to watch. So I agree. That's where I'm at as well. Tyler Evans with another super chat. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. Is there a quarterback that is starting for the first time that has a load of pressure on them that they can make or break their team season? Based on our conversation we just had, is Drew Aller.
Yeah, and I would throw the Ohio State guys in there even more so than Drew Aller.
Okay.
But, well, it depends on who wins the Ohio State job. Technically, Kyle McCord has started a game before. He started a game in 2021 against, I think, Akron when C.J. Stroud was out. So technically he started a game, but I mean, Vince, that's a little different than actually being a starter. It's like saying Ian Book's first start was against North Carolina in 2017. Was it really? Like that was for an injury. It was, there's not a lot of pressure. It just it was a little different animal. But technically, first time being the guy, I think the Ohio State, because here's why, Vince. I think Ohio State in I'm projecting them to change it, but that's more of just kind of more, I don't say wishful thinking, but just more projection than it is actual reality. But the reality is, what we have seen is that Penn State doesn't put nearly as much pressure on their quarterbacks to win them games as Ohio State does. Just reality. And so you can, Penn State has shown, hey, we can go have our quarterback throw 22 times and we're going to run the ball a dang ton and he's going to have some play actions and some bootlegs and throw some quick game and just manage the game.
Right.
And Penn State went 11-2 last year with Sean Clifford. Ohio State's not playing Ohio State's not 11-2 last year with Sean Clifford at quarterback.
Right.
Because they put so much on their quarterbacks. Does that change this year? Do they become more balanced?
Because
that right there, Vince, could be the thing that determines whether Ohio State is what we predict them to be.
That's
a
true.
12-1 playoff team or a team that drops 2 to 3 games.
Yeah.
Are you going to ask these quarterbacks to carry this football team the same way you did C.J. Stroud last year? That's asking a lot. When you've got road games against Michigan, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, and a home game against Penn State. Because kudos to Ohio State for doing something that Michigan has not done in a few years. And that's actually play a tough nut. Because even Western Kentucky in game 3, the week before Notre Dame, that's not like playing NC State by any stretch. Western Kentucky's no slouch. They were a 9-5 football team last year that throws the ball all over the place. So, that's, 2 years ago, they were scoring 44 points a game with Clay Helton's brother as their head coach, Tyler Helton. So where Michigan's just, East Carolina's their challenging game prior to Penn State. You know what I mean? It's crazy. But that's why I would say Ohio State would be my answer, Vince. But also there's a lot of pressure on Drew Aller. But I don't know that, and that's not a wrong answer, because if Drew Aller doesn't step up, Penn State can't be what they're going to be. I just would say the pressure right now for the quarterbacks at Ohio State is much greater than the pressure of the other guys at Penn State for me. But yeah, that's the interesting thing. But that's also why I'm so fired about Notre Dame this year, Vince, because, we could talk about Carson Beck.
Question we don't have.
We could talk about Carson Beck at Georgia. It's a lot of pressure on him. You're taking over for the back-to-back defending national champs, and I don't believe he's ever started a game. I mean, if it was like a, maybe in like 2021 when JD. Yeah, exactly. And so, that's a lot of pressure for him to take over. Yeah. But again, Georgia doesn't count on their quarterback to win them games the same way Ohio State does. They're a more balanced football team.
Exactly.
And they're going to have a great offensive line this year. They can just go run it down people's throat this year. Just, hey man, just don't lose it. That's right. Carson Beck's job. Don't lose us. Don't lose us the game this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's what Stetson was in year 1, and then he became more of a playmaker in year 2.
Sure.
But it's just don't lose us a game.
He made plays.
Defense,
in year 2,
run the football.
He absolutely made plays, but yeah.
You got to make 1-2 plays a game. That's it, buddy. That's all we need you to do.
Yep.
So you look around there, Vince. There's a lot of guys. You could.
I would say
if Ty Simpson wins the job at Bama, that's a guy that I would put into this category. First-time starter.
If you look around at like the upper echelon teams, right? There's just a lot of new blood at quarterback.
Yeah,
a lot of new blood and a lot of young blood at quarterback.
Inexperienced and unproven. Yeah,
and I think if I was a national writer and I wanted to, put a story out preseason or whatever, this is the year of the inexperienced quarterback. And I think whatever school does the best with their inexperienced quarterback is going to have the most, it has a chance to make a play at the national championship, and in Notre Dame's defense, most of the teams that they're going to be going up against, except for USC, right, are going to have quarterback situations where it's their first year starting, where they don't have a lot of experience there. Notre Dame has experience at quarterback. That's a check in Notre Dame's column, at least going into the season. Now, we'll see how the season plays out, but I feel like that is something that Notre Dame has in their back pocket that a lot of these title contending upper echelon teams don't have.
Yeah.
And that's huge. We haven't been able to say that in a long time.
Yeah. I want to point something else out here. People talking about, Bryce Young was from Southern California. He did well at Alabama. You guys are kind of missing the point here. Tyler was from Southern California, went to Notre Dame. He's going to Bama now. And guess what? He's expected to be the starter. Number one, Tyler played at a small private school in San Diego where the competition was terrible, which I didn't care because he was so dominant against it. Bryce Young played at Modern Day. They were playing big-time football teams every week. They were playing national football games every week. That's a completely different animal. And Bryce Young didn't start as a freshman. He sat the bench and got to learn his first year. He wasn't thrown into the fire the way that Tyler Buchner's being thrown in the fire. It's a completely different scenario. And it's just there's a lot of other things I could say, but it's a completely different animal for Bryce Young than it is for Tyler Buchner. No question about it.
David Lowe, I saw where CBS Sports has us preseason ranked 15. How do y'all feel about that? Or let's see. Do y'all guys feel that's too low? I mean,
yes and no. Go ahead, Vince. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's a little low. I think anywhere from 8 to 12 is where I would put Notre Dame going into the preseason and feel pretty comfortable about it. Look, at the end of the day, it's about what you're going to do on the field. And if you start, let's say you start at 15, okay, but you go and you take care of your business, you've got no problem being in the Final Four.
Right.
That's my thing, because you've got plenty of games on the schedule against highly rated teams, big time opportunities to raise that and erase that 15 without much of a problem. It's a very reachable thing. Look, Notre Dame could start unranked with the schedule that they've got this year. If they take care of their business, they would be in the Final Four. You know what I mean? So preseason, okay. I mean, like I said, 8 to 12, I think it's probably where they belong. 15, okay, that's fine. I mean, it's a little under.
Yeah, it's a little under, but again, it's under based on the fact that we're projecting a lot to happen well.
Absolutely.
New quarterbacks got to transition smoothly, new starters and all that. Look, Notre Dame went 9-4 last year and lost to Stanford and Marshall. And any ranking that's going to hold that against them preseason before Notre Dame has played a game is fair. I mean,
right.
it is. We think Notre Dame can be really good, but this is still a team that lost to Stanford and Marshall. You can't just I say so. I hate when people just throw out what happened in September like it didn't mean anything. It did mean something, and so I can't say, well, you ignore September for this team. I hate it when you ignore September's for anyone other than Notre Dame. But when it fits the narrative to be pro Notre Dame, then I'm going to embrace throwing out September. No, that was the same football team. They got better,
right?
But they still have a lot to prove, Vince. I mean, they showed they can go toe-to-toe with Ohio State and go toe-to-toe with USC and can smash Clemson, but they also showed that they can get embarrassed by Stanford. And again, they got outplayed the entire game. They got outplayed by Marshall almost the entire game. And so if you want to have them 15 because you want to see them do it, how's Sam going to look in this offense? That's fair. I think that's very fair. Mm-hmm. New offensive coordinator. If another team that we didn't follow, as fans didn't follow, had a similar story as Notre Dame, new offensive coordinator, young head coach. They went 9-4. They had two really bad losses last year. New O-line coach, quarterback transferred in, but he ran a different kind of offense. We'd be like, man, y'all putting a lot of hype on that team. They got a lot to prove. And I'd be like, yeah, that's fair.
Right.
So I can't say the same about Notre Dame.
All that stuff.
I would rank them higher.
Right.
I would want to know the rationale for putting them 15th. I would want to hear that. And the other thing I had is, the other thing I have with that list, Vince, that kind of bothered me is you can't, I believe it was CBS Sports that had it. And the issue that I had was, if I remember correctly,
I would like to see who they had ahead of Notre Dame.
They had Texas like 6th.
Of course they did.
Let me pull up this ranking real quick just so I can be sure of that. No, they had Texas 11. So that's fair. They had Florida State 8. So it was Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, LSU 4. Again, LSU 4 is too high.
Right.
Like, again, this is a team lost 4 games last year. They lost the Texas A&M loss, to me, isn't that much worse than losing to Marshall. Marshall's a pretty good football team last year. A&M sucked, right? I mean, but they beat Bama. Well, Notre Dame beat Clemson by 21. They still lost every other big game they played last year, right? And they got blown out by Tennessee. Right, so it's the inconsistent application of the standards. USC at 6, fine, I'm good with that. They won 11 games last year. Penn State at 7, they won 11-2. I'm good. Florida State at 8, 10-3. That's a little too high for Florida State potentially, but I could also make the case for it. Clemson at 9, Washington at 10. That's fair. I think you could even argue having Washington ahead of Florida State and Clemson. To be honest with you, Texas at 11. See, that's kind of where I'm like, okay, how are you going to have Notre Dame at 15? And have Texas at 11 based off what? Right. That would be my only argument. But again, I think Notre Dame at 15 is a fair ranking. I would want to know why they had them there. That would be my only question, Vince, would be just the why.
Sure.
But
who was at 13, 14?
It was Oregon and I think Tennessee. And then they had Kansas State 16, TCU 17, Oregon State 18, Wisconsin 19, North Carolina 20, Ole Miss 21, Tulane 22, Texas Tech 23, Texas A&M 24. It's absurd. And then Iowa 25. So, yeah, like people still just riding that that 4-loss Texas. I mean, the only year that Texas Tech was not a 4-loss or more team under Jimbo was the COVID year. And I've already pointed out, all the data tells us throw out 2020 when that season was the anomaly for a program. Northwestern, that was their anomaly in the last 4 years. Texas A&M, that was their anomaly in the last 4 years. When the 2020 season was different for a team than the 2 to 3 years before and the 2 years since, then it was a COVID-related result, in my opinion.
Right.
And that's the case for Texas A&M, in my opinion. So, yeah, but I mean, I don't have any huge issues with them. Even LSU at 4, that's too high. They did win the SEC West. I mean, that's a big accomplishment. They did win the SEC West. Okay, cool. But why are you going to have 10-4 LSU at 4 and 10-3 Florida State at 8 when Florida State went into Louisiana and beat LSU? Here's the answer. Well, that was early in the year. Early in bracket. Okay, then can we throw out Marshall and Stanford, or can we throw out Marshall then for Notre Dame? Right, because that was Marcus Freeman's second game.
Right.
Ever. Knew this, knew quarter, knew this, knew that. Can we just chalk that game out too? No, you can't for Notre Dame, but you can for LSU. Based on what? They're a different team later in the year. You mean the one in November that lost to Texas A&M when they had a playoff spot that people thought they could? People remember at that time, Vince. People were arguing that a 2-loss LSU team might make the playoff.
Yep.
If they could beat A&M and then upset Georgia, they might be a playoff team. They went out and lost a 5-7 Texas A&M team.
I was legit crying myself to sleep leading up to that game. So
yeah. I mean, and if I remember correctly, it wasn't a close game. I mean, it was 38-23.
Yeah, that's
so that team the team that lost to Florida State, lost to Tennessee at home by 27 points, got smoked by Georgia in the SEC title game, and lost by 15 to a 5-7 Texas A&M team, is the number 4 team in the country.
Who was lucky to win those 5 games, by the way.
Win what 5 games?
The Texas A&M.
Oh, yeah. I got you.
They were 5-7.
Yeah. I mean, they were not good. They lost to Appalachian State.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, at home, Appalachian State, right? I mean, Appalachian State lost to Marshall. I mean, so if you want to do the intrinsic thing, if you're going to throw that out, if you're going to ignore those losses for LSU, then we need to ignore Stanford, and we need to ignore Marshall for Notre Dame. So again, I wouldn't ignore those games for those teams, but that's why I can't justify having LSU at 4. Should they be in the top 10? Sure. Fine with that, but you can't have them ahead of Florida State. There's no justification to have them ahead of Florida State based off last season. So yeah, good questions. Those are fun. We're going to do a top 25 before the season starts, Vince. We will have an IB top 25.
Lord Tuberton. Lord.
Okay.
Next season, our linebackers will be as follows: Snead, Ziegler, Osbury, Bowen, and KVA. All top 100 talent. Has Notre Dame ever been this loaded at linebacker?
Well, I don't think it's a given that the 3 kids that they're starting now are all going to be gone. I think some of them would gone. They all have a 6th year of eligibility coming back.
True.
I would imagine at least one of them gets brought back. Maybe.
I would think that is the case as well, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Have they ever had that? Has Notre Dame ever been that loaded at linebacker? I mean, if you're just going to look at it from a recruiting ranking standpoint, no, they haven't. I mean, all those kids have a lot to prove, but from a recruiting ranking standpoint, I mean, he's right. Snead was a top 100 guy by at least one service. Osbury was, Bowen was, Kingston was. Ziegler was a 150 guy for me. But yeah, I mean, it's a talented group. Athletically, it's a very talented group. They got a lot to prove as football players, but yeah, it's a very talented. And don't discount like Bodie Cahoon either, who's every bit as athletic as some of the guys on this list. So yeah, it's a talented group. Now they just got to go show they can play.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's the next
That's
step.
the big one. That we're going to have a lot of question marks about the linebacker group if the top three guys leave, and that's what I shouldn't say that's what's left, but you know what I mean.
Right. I mean, if
you're
those guys
losing a lot of
dominate the
proven
reps this year,
production,
exactly,
you're going to lose a lot of proven production. So,
right.
Eric Crawford, I know pants questions are lame, but who is responsible for uniforms? The coach, the AD, Under Armour? Why the insistence on mustard pants? Marcus
That's
Freeman.
a great question.
Sharp enough to know that they stink.
First of all, I think Marcus Freeman has a few more important things to worry about than the color of the pants.
That's a fact.
But I mean, to me, I don't know the answer to this. My guess, Eric, would be a combination of someone in the athletic department that Jack Swarbrick has put in charge of that. We're working with Under Armour would be my guess.
Sure.
That'd be my guess.
And I would think, again, I'm assuming on my end, I would think that there's a discussion at some point, maybe with the head coach, maybe they send when they're talking about the alternate uniforms, for example, right? When they decided to go all green pants, did they send around a little questionnaire to the players like, hey, what would you guys like for the green game? Maybe. I don't know. I honestly don't know if the players had any insight into this. It was captains, that kind of a thing. I honestly don't know. I would hope that they at least get some input from pretty much all parties involved here, but
I'm always a little hesitant to include players in certain things because then they're going to start thinking that they should have more of a say than they should.
Fair enough.
I'm a fan of, hey, look, here's what I'm leaning towards. What are your thoughts? As opposed to, what do you guys want to do?
Sure.
Part of that also would depend on what my leadership is like. If I had really good leadership, here's how I would want that conversation to go. Hey, guys, want to know your guys' thought on the green jerseys this year. I would want my leader to say, Coach, we don't give a crap what jersey you put us in. Just let us go out there and ball. I mean, isn't that kind of as a coach, deep down what you're hoping they say?
Absolutely.
Hey, man, okay. Hey, Coach, those. Oh, well, here's what I'm going. Oh, those look sweet, Coach. I love those, man. So if you show it to them, but I don't want my star running back or my star left tackle or my star D tackle or my star corner coming and saying, Coach, man, I really want to wear it. I want them to focus on, I want to go shut down Marvin Harrison. I don't care what uniform you put me in. I need to do this. Right. So, yeah.
I don't know.
It just depends on what your leadership structure is.
I honestly don't know the answer to this, Yeah.
And it's just something that I haven't cared enough about to find out. I mean, we only get so many chances to get intel from people.
Right.
It's just
You want to waste those questions on uniforms?
And there's nothing I'm going to do. It's not like me asking Jack Swarbrick that question or Marcus that question is going to all of a sudden prompt a change to get Notre Dame to have different pants, so hopefully they do. We'll see. That'd have been in my negotiations with Under Armour. Fine, we'll do this, but here's some things you need to do. Marcus Freeman, all this stuff. Oh, and we need new pants.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I see if I was an athletic director, and I'm not, right? I am not. Okay. But I feel like with these negotiations, and they were ongoing. I mean, it wasn't just like a phone call and a hang up kind of a situation. They're negotiations. I would have brought it up. I would have, and not just football though either. I would have brought up all of it. Hey, let's see some mock-ups. What are you guys thinking about the future of the way we are going to be presented on the field, the court, etc.? I would want to see some stuff. You know what I mean? And then we'd have a conversation about it, and that the same conversation would go for the shoes and all of that, right? It's a conversation, but I don't know.
Some guy told me the other day he was in Chicago, and I guess there's this big Under Armour store in Chicago. I guess I'm not, and he said he walks in there and there's Steph Curry and I think there was something on soccer, and he's like, man, you had to go all in and back to find Notre Dame stuff. And I'm like, you're in Chicago, you should have Notre Dame front and center, but that's just the lack of branding, and that's partly why Under Armour is hurting, in my opinion. Is they're doing a great job with Steph Curry. And that's huge, and that's helping keep you afloat. But you're missing a huge opportunity with Notre Dame,
right?
And I just don't think they used to have a really they had a great marketing operation early. Remember the Click Clack? Remember that?
Oh yeah,
that was Under Armour.
Yeah,
protect this house. That was Under Armour.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if it's good enough for Eric Taylor and the Friday Night Lights people, then it's good enough for me.
There you go. There you go.
Archer says, here's the craziest hype I've heard all season. JJ McCarthy is comparable to Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and his goal is to be better than that.
I mean, I'm good on the kid for striving to be great, but I mean, anyone in the media or coaching talking about that is out of their minds, and there's really not else to be said about it.
You can set your own goals, and that's awesome. Set your own goals.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Great. You're at University of Michigan. You had offers from some big time schools. Sure. If you want to have high dreams, my issues with JJ McCarthy are nothing to do with JJ McCarthy. I think he's a nice player. I think he had a good first year. I think people are putting too much. It's almost kind of like y'all are doing a disservice for this kid. Y'all are putting so much hype on this kid that if he doesn't go out there and look like Patrick Mahomes and Josh, I know he's a bust. He's disappointing, blah, 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 blah. It's like what we did to Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers basically should have been a senior in high school last year. He did all right, and missed basically his junior year of high school because he decided to enroll early, or he missed his senior year because he decided to reclassify and go to Ohio State to get an NIL deal. Now that's on him. He chose to
his senior year was at Ohio State, and then his freshman year would have been at Texas, right?
Well, he didn't look like a world beater as a true freshman, and he's overrated. I mean, he was overrated, but it's because there was nothing that kid was going to be able to do to live up the expectations y'all set for him. It's like Jimmy Clausen. Jimmy Clausen was basically doomed, short of him winning like a national championship and a Heisman. Jimmy Clausen was never going to be able to live up to the expectations that were set for him at Notre Dame.
College Football Hall of Fame, all of it.
Now, again, part of that was on him.
Absolutely.
You made those choices.
Sure.
But then there's the other part where we hyped up that kid so much. It was just like, man, like Notre Dame fans, there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that look at his junior season and still don't think he was that good. Well, the team sucked. Well, that's not his fault. Patrick Mahomes had a losing record in college.
Right.
Quarterback can only do so much, especially when you play the teams that Notre Dame plays.
William Holtzinger, do you guys have any predictions for mid to late season breakouts for offense and defense, such as Jaden Thomas, Xavier Watts last year?
That's a good one because those are sort of like under the radar type of guys, right? So I'm going to go on offense. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this. I'm going to go on offense and say late in the year, Deion Colsey is going to kind of do what he did last year, but even more. I think first half of the year, Deion's going to be a nice rotation player, catch 5-6 balls in the first 5-6 games, but somewhere in the middle of the year, whether it's Duke, Louisville, or USC, Deion's going to have a breakout game and then just be that dude in the second half of the year. That's my one on offense.
It's going to be a dude.
Okay. No, be that dude, the breakout guy that this guy's
be the breakout guy.
Yeah, okay. like Jaden last year, like Xavier last year. Be that dude second half of the year. Not that dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yes.
I was like, he's going to be that dude. The
second half breakout guy is what I meant by that.
I got you. On offense, I'm going to go with Jaden Greathouse. Okay. Because I think, yes, he and you and I have talked about this on the show. We've talked about it in person. He is an amazing route runner. I think he gets himself onto the field at times, the first half of the season. But I think as he gets more comfortable in the offense, as they get more comfortable having him out there, I think he starts to take off and he starts to break out in the second half of the season. So I'll go with him on offense.
Defensively, second half of the year breakout guy. That's a good one. I'm going to go.
This one's tougher for me.
I'm going to say the light finally goes on for Ramon Henderson in the last 5 games of the year.
Okay.
How about that one, Vince?
Okay.
Because I'm hoping like Bertrand, Kaiser, Marist, Cross, Riley. I hope they're all not second half breakouts. Right. I hope that they're breaking out the first half.
Need those guys in the first half.
Yeah, but
absolutely.
I could see like Ramon coming off the bench early because DJ and Xavier are more trusted and better. But then Ramon's just like, screw this. I want to be great. And the light goes on and he's balls out.
Yeah.
That's my one on defense.
You know what? I'm going to go Jaden Mickey on defense because I think that, Cam and Benjamin are going to get a lot of the hype, obviously, and deservedly so, beginning half of the season. And then, they're going to get blows at times and teams are going to be like, well, we can't go at 5. We can't go at 20. Well, when 7's in, we're going to go after him. And I think he makes some plays. And I think he is able to break out as like one of the first guy in kind of a situation.
I dig that. They're definitely going to test him.
Oh, absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
As soon as 5 comes off the field, like, throw it 7.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, absolutely.
And hopefully he makes him pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill Walsh, what guards will be able to stop all those Navy blitzes?
Well, that's going to be a key question. But honestly, Bill, what it comes down to for me is just get a hat on a hat, and then it's up to the OC and the quarterback. I was talking with somebody at Notre Dame about this a month or so ago, and we're talking about that Navy game, and I was like, if Drew hits Michael Mayer on that wheel route early in the third quarter, game's over.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point in time, you called the play, you designed it, you got your tight end wide open. Just missed it. I mean, it's 42. It's 42-13 at that point in time, Vince, and the game's over.
That's ball game.
Or 40. It would have been 42-16 because Navy had just gone like on a long field goal drive to kick off the third quarter, and it's ball game. So at some point in time, Sam Hartman's going to have to hit throws against that zero pressure. Somebody's going to have to catch, and Chris Tyree catches a slant. Guy tries to tackle him, misses. He plants, goes outside, boom, 60-yard touchdown. Okay, you keep doing this, but we're going to keep, Sam just catches, throws a bomb to Tobias, and he just, they burn him. It's going to take that kind of thing. Make them pay. And, I look at it, it's kind of like they were a lot more aggressive, so it's a little bit of a different deal because they were in a different defense last year. But you remember in 2019, Notre Dame just kept ripping Navy up with big plays. I mean, Chase had a big play. Braden Lindsey had a 75-yard touchdown in that game. I mean, they just ran that Navy team off the field. And that was a much better Navy team than last year, Vince.
And I see that's how this time is going to go. Yeah. We're going to do all kinds of Navy stuff in the week leading up, obviously. But I just don't see a world in which Navy can stop Notre Dame's offense. Yeah. You're going to see big plays, man, and you're going to see a lot of them.
Notre Dame needs to make it that way. Right.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely. Right. They need to dictate it. They absolutely.
So it won't be up to the guards as much as it is to the quarterback and the skill players making those plays to make them pay.
Because Notre Dame can run the ball on Navy, obviously, but if they're going to dedicate all those guys to the box and bringing them like that, there's going to be all kinds of opportunities for Sam Hartman to get rid of the ball.
Well, it's also why you need a more diverse run game because you can't just duo zero pressure
you can't duo
that all day.
Yeah, right.
No, there was no gaps. There was no there was every gap was occupied by a defender.
Right. Matthew Ryrick, Vince, and Brian watching some highlights on Jeremiah Love in fall camp running routes in the slot. His wiggle and his burst is elite. Could you see him being utilized on third downs this year in the
slot?
Gotcha.
I could see it. I don't know that it would be the slot in the standpoint of like lining up as a receiver slot, but more so like you put him in at running back and he lines up in the slot as part of an empty concept or out of the backfield on third down. Yeah, something like that, right? Or you go 20 personnel and you put him in the slot opposite Chris Tyree or Greathouse or something. I could see that. I mean, he's got some guys, pretty good players got to beat out. But Matthew, when you look at the talent in the skill set, Vince, you've praised his pass catch. I mean, his ball skills. I mean, how just easily just snatches the ball quite a bit in fall camp so far. So I could see that. Am I predicting it? I need to see a little bit.
I'm not ready to go there yet.
From him. Yeah. I mean, but talent's certainly there, man.
Yeah. Could they carve out a role for him? Yeah, I do. I think that they could carve out a role for him. I just don't know what that role is just yet.
The first one for me is he's the kick returner. I mean, that's I'm giving him every chance to be your kick returner this year. That's the first role that I'm carving out for him.
I got called crazy last night when we were talking. Somebody asked who we think the return people are going to be, right? And I said, look, if Chris Tyree is who I think he's going to be on offense, there's plenty of talent to put in the return game, and I want Chris Tyree on the sidelines. I don't need him returning kicks because there's guys with some serious boogie that can be just fine in the return game, and let Chris Tyree play offense. Man, I got roasted for that comment, man, because they're like, oh, but he's a game changer. Yeah, he is, but there's other guys that can do that.
First of all, he wasn't a game changer last year. Because it's a lot harder to return kicks now, right? And the other part of it too is, he could be a game changer, but so can Jeremiah Love.
Exactly.
So can Jadarian Price. So could Jabron Payne. So could several guys. So could Micah Bell. So the whole thing is, I need to keep Chris Tyree healthy on offense.
Yes,
and if they're
absolutely,
because here's the thing, it's not just about the game day reps. It's about all the reps you have to take to be that guy going into it. Now, Notre Dame may decide, well, we're going to have him back there because we want to get him as many touches as possible. Okay, that's fine too. I'm okay with that too because we've seen him back there returning punts. Okay, if you want to put a guy that dynamic back there, I'm okay with that too. I just don't think it's nuts to say he's a guy we're really very much depending on offense, and I don't want to take a chance of him getting banged up because he got ear hold on a kick return.
Right.
Right.
With guys with a 50-yard head start coming right at you. Like,
right.
I don't know that I want to put the guy who I think is going to be an X factor on offense.
Now, of course, what's going to happen, Vince, is whoever's in for him is going to get tackled from behind or tripped up at the 50 against Ohio State, and they're going to be like, see, if Chris Tyree wasn't. And you're like, yep, you're right. Yep.
Yeah. You got me. You got me. Oh, man. Okay. From Irish Gordian Knot, hypothetical scenario where Rowan Byrne attains a comparable level of skill and ability as Tyler Biadasz.
Yeah, from Wisconsin.
Okay. Who would be the most fitting comparison for Antoine Knapp?
It's Anthony.
Wow.
You've now done that twice.
And I will continue to do it because that looks like Antoine.
It does. No, I see the comparison there. I don't have a problem with it. Inside guy, mauler type of guy. He was obviously who played for Joe Rudolph at Wisconsin. I think that Rowan Byrne's bigger than Tyler was. I think Tyler was more of a center guard, where Rowan is more of a pure guard. He's a power right tackle now, big enough and long enough to play right tackle. I just don't know if he necessarily moves quite well enough to play right tackle at a place like Notre Dame. But I could see the similarities, style of play wise, but I think there's just some different body type wise. Anthony, fitted comparison to Anthony Knapp, it's the one I've made on the site, which is I think Jarrett Patterson's the best comparison I can think of for him. And I believe in my class breakdown article, I believe that's who I have compared him to. So let me just go look at my Anthony Knapp comp for him and see if I remembered that correctly. Yeah, it's Jarrett Patterson. Body type wise, movement wise, played left tackle in high school, might project better inside. I see a lot of similarities between Anthony Knapp and Jarrett Patterson. I think Anthony has a little bit more punch than Jarrett did at the same age. But body type wise, movement wise, frame wise, there's a lot of similarities between those two. A lot of similarities. It's a good question.
Someday I'll get that Knapp kid's name right. Sorry.
It's okay.
Anthony.
It's all good.
All right.
It does look like Antoine. I mean, I've never seen Anthony spelled like that before.
No, me neither. People get too creative with the birth certificates.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Every time I see something like that, though, I think of that skit from the substitute teacher.
Oh, my God.
Timothy, present.
Yeah. Present.
Where is Aaron right now?
You want
to go to Warbalaki?
It's great. It's one of my favorite all-time skits. It's not even close.
It really
all right. Okay.
Sorry.
I can't even. I've met kids named Blake, and I can't say their name right.
Yeah.
I can't.
You want to go to Warbalaki?
Blank. All right.
Jay Quellen. Where is Jay Quellen at? You say your name right. Denise. Denise. Thank you. The second one was kind of lame.
It was kind of lame, but
yeah, it's like they tried.
There were some funny parts, but yeah, the first one is all.
You better be sick, classic. Dead, or mute, Aaron. Why didn't you say your name the first time? Because it's Aaron, son of a. You done messed up, baby, Ron.
My favorite.
You went down to Oshag Hennessy's office.
Yeah.
Tell him what you did. Who? Oshag Hennessy, Principal O'Shaughnessy. Get your butt up. Insubordinate and churlish.
Fake announcement. It's a fake announcement. That's great. Yeah. Oh, great. It's good stuff. Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. All right. From David. True or false? If Sam Hartman throws his touchdown total from his last 2 years, 38 minimum, are the Irish in the playoffs?
Oh, I got to think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the exception would be if it's a lot like Ian Book's 2019. Remember, he had 34 that year, Vince, but he had he had like 6 against New Mexico and 5 against Bowling Green.
Feasted off of those.
Yeah, I think like 18 of his 34 were like 5 games against bad teams. Like if it's something like that, then no. So there's always that caveat. So he had 5 against New Mexico, 5 against Bowling Green, 5 against Navy, 4 against Duke, and 4 against Stanford. So that's 5, 10, 15,
23.
23 in 5 games, which means in the other 8 games, he threw 11.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it can't be like that.
Right. Exactly.
Right? It can't be like that. It can't be like that. But if it's a little bit more of a balanced attack, sure. And there's going to be games where you don't throw a lot of touchdown passes because you just destroy a team. I mean, I don't need Sam Hartman throwing for 5 touchdowns against Tennessee State. If he throws for 1 and Audric in the running game goes off, and fine, call it a day, get him out, let Steven and Kenny get some work, and we're good to go, right? Or if he only throws like 2 against 10, fine. But yeah, I mean, but that's the thing about Sam is, I mean, last year he had 38 in 12 games. It was 4, 3, 6, 2, 1 against Army, a game they won 45-10. 5 and then 1 against Louisville in the game he didn't play well. 2, 4, 4, 3, 3. 2021 he threw 39, and it was 3, 1 against Norfolk State. He was out at halftime. Then it was 2, 3, 2, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 1 against Clemson in a blowout loss. 3, 2, and 3. Right. So I mean, if it's something like that, then, this team's gonna be really good.
Yeah.
This team's gonna be really good because this team has a way better defense than those Wake teams. And they have way better run game.
Yes.
Than those Wake teams. So
right.
Yeah, if he's repeating his numbers from a touchdown standpoint, as long as he doesn't repeat the interception numbers, and they don't have to be like 4, just give me 10, 11 at the most, and I can live with that. You know what I mean? Because he's going to make some mistakes. He's a gunslinger. He's going to turn the ball over more than you're probably comfortable with. But you got to live with that because he's going to make some throws where you're like, holy crap.
Yeah, ideally, I feel like 9 or 10 is where I want to be interception wise. Like I'm
10
really hoping he doesn't hit
of
double digits.
Season,
but
if he's averaging if he's averaging less than 1 a game, Vince.
Yeah, I hear you.
As long as they're good turnover, and that's going to sound crazy, but it's like,
it's going to see his mentality and the way he throws the football. It's Brett Favre-ish, right? I mean, he's going to take some chances, but more often than not, those chances are going to benefit Notre Dame.
Right.
But there are going to be some times where they don't.
Because he had 3 or 4. He has 3 or 4 interceptions a year that were tip balls. Sometimes his fault, sometimes not. It's just stuff's going to happen. Just limit it a little bit.
Right. Fighting Mike 87. Thanks for the super chat. Forget pants. I want Marcus Freeman's Under Armour gear.
Yeah,
you're not the only one. There's a lot of people out there this is a missed opportunity if they don't make this happen.
You look at his avatar. He has one of the photos of Michael Mayer that Angela took last year. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah.
From Archer, in an article discussing Florida State's potential realignment, the author mentioned Notre Dame and North Carolina as the programs the SEC believe would bring value. What would the SEC have to offer to sway Notre Dame?
Oh gosh, I mean, they'd have to give Notre Dame so many concessions.
Right.
You're gonna get paid more than everybody else. You're gonna have this. I mean, Notre Dame would have so many concessions they'd have to make in my opinion, to go to the SEC. I don't see it
because there's nothing forcing them into a conference right now.
And if they do go to a conference, the reality is they're going to go to the Big Ten or the ACC, depending on if the ACC still exists. I could honestly see the ACC making some huge deal to Notre Dame to get them in the ACC to save that league. And I could even see Notre Dame maybe taking it. And honestly,
that would be they would be the savior.
Depending on what the offer was, I could even live with it a little bit, to be honest with you. I could. But to join the SEC, unless it was just the Big Ten didn't want Notre Dame at that time and there was only 2 leagues, then Notre Dame would have no leverage. But yeah, somebody said concession. Brian Kelly has to go back to Grand Valley State. That's well played. Very well played.
That's great.
Very well played.
His name's on the indoor facility. So
yeah, there you go. There you go. But yeah, it would have to be like a big you'd have to concessions. We're not going to play. No, we're only
not going to play the number 1 schedule every year.
Right.
Either,
Yeah, we're not gonna play in Mississippi a whole lot. We want to have these teams regularly on the schedule. That kind of, it would have to be some stuff like that. Would most likely be part of any kind of requirements. That's just, guys, I have no intel on that. That's just,
we're just
my opinion.
Yeah.
Of what I think they would or should do.
They would have to move mountains, man. If it was an offer that was on the table in August of 2023, you're talking about having to move mountains because there is nothing pushing Notre Dame to a conference right now.
Well, let's just say there was. let's say that Notre Dame just decided they wanted to be in a conference, just for the sake of argument.
So they put out feelers. They're like, hey, best offers, bring them in.
My point is the SEC would be at the bottom of Notre Dame's desired list.
Right.
Notre Dame wants to make this a somewhat academically oriented decision and also Olympic sports oriented decision as they can. I don't think they have any desire to have to compete with. And let's be honest, it's a dirty league. They even cheat when cheating's legal. They still cheat. They still find ways to break rules.
Right.
Notre Dame doesn't. Why would you want to be a part of that with all your sports? Why would you want to be a part of that?
Right.
With all due respect. As much as I hate the Big Ten, I mean, that one would make a lot more sense for Notre Dame and all the reasons that you and I talk about. Like, I can live with the ACC because there's a lot of schools in the ACC that are very convenient and easy for Notre Dame to get to.
Sure.
And all the coastal schools, I mean, from Pitt, BC, Syracuse on down, those are easy flights for Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
Very easy flights for Notre Dame. Very easy travel schedule, no problem. Half the league is kind of somewhat near you, if you think about it. I mean, Virginia's a hop and a skip on a flight. I mean, you just fly to DC, BC, Pitt, Syracuse. I mean, those aren't bad trips.
Right.
Where the most you've got Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and then everybody else is even south of that. There's no academic affiliation there outside of Vanderbilt. There'd be no reason to make that move unless it was your only option, in my opinion. So in order for the SEC to get them to do that, I think they'd have to basically get Notre Dame to, like, they'd have to give them so many concessions, and Notre Dame would just be stupid to say no. Right. And I just don't see that being the case. I really don't.
Michael Johnson, if the defensive line has a 9 to 10 man rotation, how good can they be overall, and with a rested Cross in the middle?
Well, the last part would be huge, Michael. If they could keep Howard Cross fresh, where he's never playing more than like 30, 35 snaps in a game, that would be huge. And because, again, you can always ramp those up and cut like 3 or 4 of the big games, right? But if you can keep them 30, 35 and lower, he doesn't get more than 15 against Tennessee State and Central Michigan, then sure, that's awesome. Because I think we've seen it. When Howard's fresh, he's twitchy, he's disruptive, he's productive. And go watch Ohio State game last year. He was the best defensive lineman. The two best defensive linemen Notre Dame had last year against Ohio State were him and Riley Mills. And it's not close. But Howard Cross was clearly the best guy they had against him. And he was fresh. Right? And then later in the year, he wears down a little bit. He's just not as productive. He's a step slower. Well, he can't afford that. He can't afford to be a step slow.
Right.
So if they could keep Howard Cross fresh, he's going to be a very disruptive player for Michael. As far as the 9-man rotation is, I'm not going to give you this cop-out answer. I'm going to give you a cop-out premise. The premise is it depends on why they have a 9-10-man rotation. Is it because nobody's really giving me what I need, so we're just keep having to play guys in hopes that with the rotation that we can get enough production out of the rotation because we don't have any studs? Or is it, well, we have some dudes on there, man, but we're going 9-10 deep in most games because we just got a lot of kids that can play and help us. But when we play Ohio State, it's a 7-man rotation. When we play USC, it's a 7-8-man rotation. We play Clemson, it's a 7-man rotation. But it gets everybody else, it's 9 or 10 because you just got that many kids that are helping you out and you want to keep guys fresh. They're going to be real good, Michael. If it's 9 or 10 because nobody's that guy, and so we got to mix and match different matchups to get that production, that's a problem. I think it's going to be more of the first option. Vince.
I agree. I feel like if they expanded to 9 or 10, and I agree with your premise of the big games being different than some of the other games, I agree with that wholeheartedly. But if they're getting 9 to 10 guys on the field, it's because those guys have forced their way onto the field for good reasons. The scenario I see is if like nobody's really stepping up, I feel like the rotation shrinks. I don't know that it grows. You know what I mean? And so if they're at 9 to 10, it's hard for me to see a premise where that's a negative, just based on kind of how things go on defensive line and things like that. So if they're at 9 to 10, I would say 9 times out of 10, that's a really good problem to have because those guys are saying, hey, you got to get me on the field. I need to make some plays. And then, of course, it helps out the starters stay more rested. So, it's good.
I'm going to respond to this from Fighting Mike 87. He says, I don't want Notre Dame to be a savior to the 4th best conference at best. First of all, the ACC to me is the 3rd best conference. I mean, it is. when was the last time the Big 12 won a championship? When was the last time the Pac-12 won a championship? The ACC has 3 college football championships in the last decade. 3. How many does the Big 10 have? 1. Right? I mean,
yeah.
So the problem with the ACC is not that they suck, it's that they're not making money.
Right.
If you look at the preseason rankings, there's 3 teams that are top 20 caliber teams. Throw Notre Dame into that conversation, and the ACC is not, even if we grant your premise of them being the 4th best conference. So let's say he thinks the Pac-12 is 3rd, okay? And whatever, or Pac-12 goes away and the Big 12 is 3rd. Even if you grant that premise, the whole point is that once Notre Dame becomes that in that conference, that changes.
Right.
They're no longer the 3rd best conference or the 4th best conference. They now have Notre Dame. You now have Notre Dame. You now have Clemson. You now have Florida State. You now have Miami. You've got North Carolina. I mean, you've got some pull there now. And as we saw in 2020, when Notre Dame joined the league, it brought everybody else up. The people that are smart to cover the ACC know how stupid some of these coaches are for hammering Notre Dame. Get in or get out. No, shut your mouth.
Take your
Because
money.
if you look at the most viewed, look at all the games in the ACC the last 5 years, and you take the 10 most viewed games, a number of viewers, I promise you over half of them are Notre Dame games.
Oh, I would say about regular season more than that even.
So, 8. Yes. And so the whole point is if Notre Dame joined the league, that would be the what they would need to then be able to kind of renegotiate their contract and get a bigger deal. That's the whole point. But you throw a team like Notre Dame in, you now have a program that's been in 2 college football playoffs the last 7-8 years. Right. You've got another team that's won 2 championships in the last 7 or 8 years. You have another team that won a championship a decade ago and is on the verge of getting back on track. Plus, you have the how good they are in other sports. And so the whole point is you're not a savior if you join a league and they stay bad.
Right.
Like Alex Rodriguez was not a savior to the Rangers. He was a very well-paid guy on a team that sucked. Right? I mean, he wasn't a savior. A savior is someone who, right, you resurrect it, right? You save it. Look at my faith. I am broken. I cannot fix myself. I need Christ to be my savior, to make me whole. I can't do it on my own, right? He has to do it. But I'm now free. I'm now whole. I'm now not what I was, right? That's the whole point. Jesus says, come to me as you are, and I promise you, you will leave a different person if you truly have saving faith. It's kind of the similar thing here. It's a little rough. I don't want to get struck by lightning with the theology, but the point is, what is a savior? A savior saves you. You are no longer in that bad place.
Right.
If Notre Dame went to the Big Ten, they're not a savior. They're already really good. If they go to the SEC, they're already really good. What's the point? Now you're just jumping on the bandwagon and making money. Notre Dame should always be a trendsetter. Oh, you guys think you're bad? Fine. Hey, ACC, get the Florida State AD president up here. We're going to meet in Greens. We're going to meet in Charlotte this weekend. We're going to talk some stuff out. We're going to join your league. We're going to save you guys, but here's what we want. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. We want you to bring this team on, because it wouldn't just be Notre Dame. It would have to be Notre Dame and someone. I think Notre Dame could then dictate who we want that someone to be.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, that could be something Notre Dame would do. So, I mean, to me, that would be much more ideal than joining the Big Ten of the SEC. I've said this before.
Oh yeah, I could wrap my head around
because
that.
You are the savior. I mean, think about that. Think about how much pub Notre Dame got in 2020.
Yeah.
Save the college football season. There was literally talk about that because it was Notre Dame going to the ACC, and because the ACC was thinking about not playing, and it wasn't until Notre Dame was like, "Well, we're interested party. Hey, cool." ACC was on the verge of following in the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big Ten's footsteps and the Pac-12's footsteps until Notre Dame kind of got involved,
right?
And think all the hype Notre Dame got that saved the ACC, right? And you have already proven you can dominate that league in football,
right?
So if you're gonna have to join, if they decide we want to join the conference, absolutely, I would rather them go to the ACC.
It's not close,
because then they can be. This is the team that killed the mega conferences, or you know what I mean? Like Notre Dame saved college football from the mega conferences. Dude, you tell me think about how much pub Notre Dame would get for that.
Right.
So yeah, I would. I don't understand how any Notre Dame fan could want them to join the Big Ten. I just don't know how you could. If you don't understand what I'm saying, then you don't know the program's history. I don't know how anyone could feel okay with Notre Dame joining the Big Ten. If they have to do it, they have to do it. But why would you want them to join a conference that's rejected them twice, and now they want to reap the rewards of Notre Dame's greatness, which you caused by rejecting them because you're a bunch of bigots? I don't understand why people still feel that way with Notre Dame. I don't know how Notre Dame fans feel that way, Vince. I can't get – maybe it's just me, but, like, there are some sins that are just like, yeah, I can forgive you, right? But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting.
Right.
I forgive you. We'll play you guys in certain games, but I don't forgive you. I mean, I didn't forget it. I didn't just ignore that it didn't happen to me, right? And now you want to benefit off of us now that we've become what we've become. Screw you. You know, and the past isn't the past. That's nonsense. The past isn't the past.
And
right?
and regionally based conferences don't exist anymore.
Right.
And they don't exist in the Big Ten
Right.
either. They're this time next year, 2 teams from LA are going to be in the Big Ten.
And Jim Delaney spent time and time again trying to hammer Notre Dame. This isn't like it's all the way back to Fielding Yost, and it's never happened again since then. Jim Delaney used to try to crush Notre Dame all the time.
Right.
This is recent. And let's not forget, it was the Big Ten that was trying to cancel football in 2020. Right? Remember that? They were trying to get everybody else to go along with them.
Yeah.
They wanted to cancel football in 2020.
They ended up playing a 6-game schedule.
Be part of that? Give me a break. Give me a break. So, yeah. I mean, I realize Big Ten's probably where they're going to go if they ever go to a conference. Doesn't mean I have to like it.
I hope that's not the case. But
yeah.
Crispy Bacon, thoughts on Mensa, thinking this is the year to win a title.
Talking about Nana Osafo-Mensah. I want them to embrace that. Now, there comes a point in time where it's like, okay, it's time to stop talking about that and focus on Navy. But, yeah, I want this team looking at every week as, hey, we're looking to become the best we can be, because if we're the best we can be, nobody can beat us. Absolutely. I want them having that attitude. It just comes a point in time where it's like, okay, like Coach Freeman said, okay, camp started. Right now our focus is on become the best team we could be to get ready to go beat Navy. And when you beat Navy, hey, I'm only worried about Tennessee State. I'm only worried about NC State. That's the process. But at the foundation of that process is we have a goal that we're working towards. If you beat Ohio State, and the reason that you have to have that macro view, Vince, and not only focus on the micro of week to week, is because when you beat Ohio State and you're not focused on the macro, then guess what, Vince? We've arrived. We beat Ohio State. Nope. You beat Ohio State. Hey,
awesome.
Monday morning, guys, it's over with. We got to beat Duke.
Right.
Because we didn't win a championship this time. We just beat a team in September.
Right.
It's a big win. It shows what we're capable of. We got 7 more of these we got to win before we can really feel like we did something.
Right. And there's a lot of things that Notre Dame has to prove about participating in a big game and then being ready for the next one.
Yeah.
You know, based on last year, right?
Especially with the schedule they play.
Coach. Absolutely.
Yeah, that Ohio State to
whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Like Clemson's slate is not easy. It's Ohio State, Duke, who won 9 games last year, Louisville, USC, Pitt, and Clemson. It's not a cakewalk.
Right. David Lowe, Brian, do you think Hartman will utilize his tight ends a lot since he's in a new offense? He'll use them if they're open, and that's what the read is.
So I understand why people think this, because we've talked about this. He didn't throw the tight ends a lot, but that was a product of the system that he played in. A quarterback is going to throw the ball where the read tells him to throw the football.
Correct.
So it really comes down to how much do you prioritize it as a coaching staff? Is your tight end always your number 2 or 3 read? Well, if that's the case, he's not going to get the ball a whole lot. Does the coach do things where the tight end is the top of the thing? Sure. Then you're going to go with that more. So it really just comes down to the relationship he has with the tight ends and where the tight end is built into the concept as far as the part of the read. Is he 1? Is he 2? Is he 3? Is he 4? Is he a check down? Do they block him a lot? Those are things that we're going to have to find out, in my opinion. Those are absolutely things we're going to have to find out. Absolutely.
Yep. PK, last year, Chris Tyree was number 3 of 3 running backs. Tough for him up the middle. This repositioning is key to Notre Dame's season. No longer a 3-man rotation.
Oh, I think they're still going to have
Well, I think he's saying that Chris Tyree is no longer involved in a 3-man rotation. Right?
Okay. If that's the case, then yes, that is a very astute observation. They're still going to play 3 running backs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And if not more.
Yeah, I would say I'd rather go 4. Now, you got to be careful because you need to, and that's not going to be true. I mean, there's going to be some games where it's 2, right?
Sure.
You may only go 2 deep in Ohio State game and USC or whatever. But, they're still going to have a 3-man rotation. The question is going to be, to your point, it's getting Chris Tyree out of that mold. Yeah, but see, here's the thing: is Chris Tyree still should have been used differently as a running back. There's still plenty of things you could do. And if Notre Dame didn't have Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne and Jeremiah Love, then Chris Tyree would still be a running back.
Right.
You needed that to be able to move him somewhere else.
Sure.
Right. There's still plenty of things you could have done with him as a running back. They just refused to do it.
Mm-hmm.
At least they refused to do it the last 2 years. As a freshman, he averaged over almost 7 yards a carry because they had him running counters and outside, inside zone encounters and reverses and stuff like that.
Banging their head against the wall with Chris Tyree.
Yeah.
Last year.
They tried to turn him into a downhill between the tackles running back the last 2 years, which is why his production the last 2 years wasn't nearly as good as it was
his
freshman year, Vince. Remember, they put him in for that reverse against Georgia Tech. Remember that? Like they ran like a toss and then or an outside run and faked it, and then they came back with a reverse. He had 100 yards in the game against Florida State. He ran at 40. I mean, had
I just don't ever understand why they got away from that.
Yeah, 74 yards on 70 carries against Boston College. Had 109 yards against Syracuse, and then they don't play him in the ACC title game until the third or fourth quarter. And the first time they hand him the football, he cuts back 21-yard touchdown. And if you go back and watch that game, Clemson's first team defense was still on the field on that play, and was just one of those things where you just never understand it. Never understand it. So it is what it is.
Joseph Dobrinsky, or Dob Brzezinski.
Yeah, I'll let you struggle with that one.
There's a lot going on there. Sorry, Joe. With the news about the announcers for Notre Dame games on NBC, I was just wondering what your thoughts are on Tony Dungy calling the games a few years ago. He was great.
I thought he did a great job.
He was great.
I just like people who are knowledgeable. I don't need you to have a personality. I mean, I'd rather here's where I'm at. I'd rather the play-by-play guy have the loud personality than the color guy.
Yep.
I want the color guy to be knowledgeable. Right? Know what you're talking about. Nothing annoys me more than listening to a color guy who's supposed to know the team talking about Jaden Thomas as a tight end.
Correct.
It just tells me you did like 2 minutes of research before this game started.
Right. The two best color guys that Notre Dame has had in recent history have been Tony Dungy and Mike Mayock.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, because they know the game, and regardless of what Mike Mayock did out with the Raiders, he knew the game enough to educate people while watching Notre Dame football.
Right.
And I know that's not necessarily what some people want to hear, but those were the best ones in my opinion.
Right. And that's like my issue with Jason Garrett. A couple times I listened is he's very dull, but I don't really care about that. I care, but he would just give like real super fit. The guy clearly knows football.
Right.
He's been an offensive coordinator and a head coach in the National Football League. The guy knows football. But he would just stick to the superficial stuff.
Right.
And, just surface level. Like and I'll say this, if Jack Collinsworth had a better color guy, I could live with Jack Collinsworth as the play-by-play guy.
That's a hard pass for me.
I could. I mean,
it's
just
the other way around.
To me, the color guy determines the success of a broadcast. It just does.
Yeah, disagree.
Yeah.
The play-by-play guy needs to bring along the color guy. The play-by-play guy is the professional. The color guy is usually not.
I just don't really care what a play-by-play guy has to say. That's my.
If you have an excellent play-by-play guy, they can make the color guy better. 100%.
I mean, I guess, but if the color guy doesn't know what he's talking about, it doesn't really matter. And if he's just giving you surface level analysis, it doesn't matter.
But there's certain ways that you set up a guy to make him sound like,
which is why Mayock and Tirico are so good.
Because Tirico is a freaking
and it's why Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt are really good. Because yes, Gus brings some excitement, but Gus also does a pretty good job of setting up Klatt for different things, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a very underrated part of what makes Gus Johnson good. Gus Johnson isn't just good because he's an energetic, and I do love that about him. He's about the only color guy that I enjoy listening to.
But he set, he's
like Mike Tirico. But my whole point is, if a color guy, if a play-by-play guy is just okay, but he's got a really knowledgeable color guy. For me, I'm
Gotcha.
fine with that because I want a guy that knows football. And, you know, the one thing I'll say about Jack Collinsworth, he at least has a voice that you can listen to. You know, and here's the other thing, Vince. He's not going to get worse. He's going to get better and better. He had no business getting the job he got.
Hope so.
But he's going to get better. And, you know, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's just another example of NBC treating Notre Dame like
it's a proving ground, and it's the minor leagues, and that's a problem. They literally have a play-by-play guy on staff who is in Notre Dame Stadium, who's under NBC contract that is going to do radio instead of the TV version, in Paul Burmeister.
Oh, I've said that. Yeah, you and I agree on that a million times.
It's ridiculous that they don't make that change. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
It's because he's not a Collinsworth.
Oh, 100%. There's
no doubt. It's not even a knock on Jack. I don't have any ill will towards Jack. I don't know Jack, but it's very clear why he got that job, because he's a Notre Dame grad whose dad is Chris Collinsworth,
and he sounds exactly like his dad. Right. You know,
Paul Burmeister is a significantly better play-by-play guy.
He's a pro.
Yeah.
If you just flip-flop Paul Burmeister and Jack Collinsworth, I guarantee you Jason Garrett's better.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I just don't know how much better. Like, Jason Garrett's got to get more comfortable in his own shoes expressing those things.
Right. Agreed.
And I'm sure the NBC execs have warned him about it, because that was kind of their thing with Mailbag, is they would always they didn't want to be as technical. I'm like, well, right. That's preaching to the lowest common denominator, the lowest form, too. And I don't like that.
Because NBC has proven time and time again that they don't make good decisions on who goes in the booth, and that goes back 10, 15 years.
Notre Dame's their minor leagues. And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Vel Hines. So B, who's stepping up in practice?
A little too early, Vel, for me for that one. We saw that first full practice, but they didn't have pads on, and after that, they really just kind of have just gone through drills. And like I was telling Vince and I were talking about this, like if you don't look good going through drills and you're on scholarship at Notre Dame, you shouldn't be on scholarship at Notre Dame, right? Like, you know, there's certain things you can tell, like this guy's more comfortable in his technique, or those kind of different aspects of it. But like, you know, who's stepping up in practice? We can't possibly know who's stepping up, and that's why we focus in our breakdowns of like who looked good athletically, who made a really nice catch and all that, but until you see team, you don't really, in 7-on-7 and the more competitive stuff, right? Like the 1-on-1s, the 7-on-7s and team, you don't really know who's stepping up. Right. We're going to get another shot at that. Like next week?
Tuesday night.
This upcoming Tuesday night.
Yep.
We'll get another team practice. Hopefully they show us some stuff.
The last one.
Yeah. We'll have a better idea after that one than we do now. I just haven't seen enough, honestly.
Right. Yep.
At this point in time.
The worst 2K big men HD. Who scores the first touchdown of the season?
I don't know who, but I know one of two people I want, Vince, and I want to hear what you think about that.
Okay.
I want it to either be Chris Tyree or Tobias Merriweather.
Ooh, nice.
I want one of those two guys to have that. Yes, a big touchdown. Either Tobias over the top or Chris catches one and runs. Yeah. I want one of those two things to happen. If it's Audric or something, I'm cool with that. Or tight end, I'm cool with that.
Sure.
But like that would be the statement win. Like midfield, a bomb on a post route to Tobias for 6.
Right. Oh, that would be beautiful.
Chris Tyree catches a cross or a slant, just outruns the defense for a touchdown. Yeah, that would be it for me. Yeah. Catches or takes a reverse or something like that. Those would be the two that would be best for me.
Those would be like electric type touchdowns, which I'm all about, because we're going to see a bunch of those this season. But to be the first, like if that's the first one, to be like, all right, where's the popcorn? Here we go.
Yeah.
This is going to be
tone
a great
setting,
season.
right? It's like, okay, exactly. This is the guys. What's the being of show? It's X factors, right? It would show that, hey,
right,
the X factor stepping up.
Oh, it's going to be great. Coach Koch, can you name any walk-ons that make an impact or compete for a scholarship? Are there any walk-ons that have impressed so far in camp?
Well, Luke Talich is not going to be a walk-on for very long, or shouldn't be anyway. But I'll say this, Vince, and I may do a story about this. Just depends. I don't know if I have time yet, but Notre Dame's walk-on situation is really impressive. I mean, watching just the freshman, the Jordan Faison, that kid's a really good football player.
He was going to be my next one after.
Trey Reeder, the linebacker from Florida, that's a sophomore now. Watching him go through, he's just small.
Yeah,
but that kid's athletic. That kid can move. The defensive end whose name I can't pronounce, it's a big kid. Like he's could he be a rotation guy someday? Maybe. There's a lot of really quality walk-ons on this football team, Vince. And the Leo Scheidler at receiver. A kid can play. I mean, that kid, maybe he could be a Matt Salerno down the road someday. There's guys like that. This is a really impressive walk-on team. And not even just the specialists like, Zach Yoakum, who's a walk-on.
Right.
But there's some really athletic, talented walk-ons on this team. Some of them are just small. Like Trey Reeder. If Trey Reeder was 2 inches taller and about 25 pounds heavier, he's probably on Division I scholarship for football.
And he is. I was standing right along with the linebackers the other day, and he's like a assistant coach.
Is he really?
By the way,
okay.
He's like coaching guys up, letting them
sophomore,
showing them what to do. Like, yeah, I didn't realize.
Yes,
I didn't realize he was a sophomore because he's got like a mustache and like this whole thing going on.
Vince. Yeah,
I had no idea. I figured he was a senior, like a walk-on senior who's been doing this for a long time.
Sophomore.
I am shocked by that. First of all, because sophomore. He was coaching up these young guys big time during individual drills, like off to the side. It was impressive. It was impressive.
Yeah. Yep. That doesn't surprise me from what I've heard about Trey.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me.
I was like, okay, this guy knows what's up.
Yeah. Sophomore. True sophomore.
I had no idea. I thought he was a senior. I really did. All right. Zach Martin, do you think Flanagan can play D?
We've already talked about some of that, like Marty Hour. We've already talked about some of those guys in the past. That's why I didn't bring those guys up again.
Marty Hour's going to play special teams, man. Yeah, I would be shocked if he doesn't play special teams.
But we've already talked about him. I just was kind of some different names than what we talked about in the past. But I just don't want to leave him out either.
And Dylan DeViesen, just because he's going to be the holder, which I'm a little.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
I'm a little surprised about because usually that's the punter. But he's going to be the holder, it looks like. Yeah. So he's obviously done something to get some playing time.
Well, he's going to travel because he's the signaler. He's going to be one of the signalers too, I imagine. So
good call. So you could say he stepped up. That's a good one. All right. Anyway, Zach Martin, do you think Flanagan can play D at Notre Dame if for some reason the tight end gets too crowded or whatever?
I do. Yeah. Would he be like a big time starter? No, probably not. Could he play in the rotation at defensive end if the need was there down the road? Yeah, he could. He's a big boy, 6'6", 260 already, guys. That's a big boy. And he moves well, man. It's very smooth for his size, too, man. Like, he catches the ball well. I had him in my most recent practice report. I liked what I saw from him, just moving around, just running around and pad, with no pads on and stuff. He moves well. But, yeah, he could play defense, no doubt. Last one, Vince.
Okay. Eric Santini. Would you be interested in a situation with the scheduling like they do with the ACC, but with the Big Ten, where we're independent but play so many Big Ten teams, Brian?
No, not really.
I don't want to do any favors.
Yeah, I mean, look, to me is I like. Here's the deal: there's value for Notre Dame playing the ACC, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand. Go look at how Notre Dame has recruited the East Coast of the United States since they started playing in the ACC. Look at how many kids from Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia that they've been able to land in that period of time. It's not a coincidence. Now, they have gotten some guys from those regions in the past, but the volume is different and the impact of those players is different. And we talk to these kids. I saw Notre Dame play when I was a sophomore. I was on a visit at so-and-so school, and they were playing Notre Dame because guess what? Every time one of these schools hosts Notre Dame, it's their biggest recruiting weekend of the year.
Yeah.
It just is.
Well.
And so that stuff matters. What value does Notre Dame have playing at Wisconsin and Minnesota and Iowa and Indiana and Illinois and Rutgers and Maryland? It brings no value to them at all. So forget the whole just my already feelings I had. Because like I've always said, I want to play Michigan State. Sure. Why do I want to play Michigan State? Because that was one of the teams that fought for Notre Dame. They just got outnumbered. They wanted Notre Dame in the Big Ten. They fought for Notre Dame. And Michigan State was willing to play Notre Dame. They didn't duck Notre Dame for 3 or 4 decades like Michigan did. Right. So I got respect for Michigan State. I would play Michigan State. I'd play Purdue. I'd play some Big Ten teams. I just don't want to have some agreement where they can then claim, hey, we got Notre Dame and use that. Now, I had somebody text me that one of the holdups in the TV and I don't know if this is true or not. This is what somebody said, but it would make sense. That one of the holdups is that, ESPN or NBC would like for Notre Dame to kind of not play as many ACC schools and play more Big Ten schools because now the NBC has the Big Ten. To me, it's like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, because again, it's just another example of the NBC not prioritizing Notre Dame.
Exactly. They're prioritizing the Big Ten, and they want to double down on the fact that they're going to play Notre Dame.
Right. So no, I wouldn't mind playing some Big Ten teams. I would love to see
Sure.
Michigan State back on the schedule. I've said this
Me
time
too.
and time again. I'd love to see Michigan State be a normal
I actually
every
like that
year
trip.
team on the
I like
schedule.
going up there. I mean,
Because we can drive.
Yeah, I like that
Yeah.
trip.
I
like a trip to
respect that
Purdue.
rivalry. Yeah, I like that respect. I respect that rivalry a lot more than I do the Michigan one.
Yep.
Just because of all the other history that should not be ignored. And so when I look at events, I just don't – there's just not a lot of value in playing the Big Ten teams from expanding, building your base. Like they just don't – that does nothing for Notre Dame except give them a big TV deal. It just does nothing. There is value in playing in the ACC that a lot of people don't understand, because some of you look at this at a way too narrow view of, well, the ACC doesn't have a great football. It's kind of not the point, right? Like it's just it's not the point of why they wanted to get a foothold into that conference. They wanted to get into that conference for two reasons. Number one, there's a lot more like-minded institutions in that school than Notre Dame than the Big Ten. Now, I'm not saying the Big Ten doesn't have very good academic institutions. I'm not saying that, but they are big private school, public school, research-oriented institutions. Even the public schools that are in the ACC, like the University of Virginia, for example, Vince, it is a little smaller school, but it's a highly academic school that's not quite the research emphasis of like the Big Ten schools, which, like Michigan State's a big time agricultural school, right? It's just a much bigger school. And so, and you look at the size of University of Virginia, for example, it's like 25,000 students. Right, undergrad, and it's only 17 undergraduates. And then you go look at like Ohio State University, Vincent, and that's
40,000.
Yeah, it's way bigger. Let me pull that up here.
The number?
I believe it is. You're close to it, Vince. But let's go to Ohio State. Their enrollment, it is undergraduates. It's 47,000, and this is just the Columbus campus. 47,000. They have almost as many postgraduates on campus as the University of Virginia has as undergraduates on campus. It's a completely different animal.
Right.
And just more academic oriented schools, more liberal arts oriented schools, just more in line with who Notre Dame is. Plus, it gets Notre Dame right on that really talent rich, alumni rich, donor rich. Because here's the thing. Look at the biggest growing population centers on the East Coast. It's like Florida, Atlanta, Charlotte. Virginia's growing because of the Northern Virginia, all the people that are working for the government, because it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a lot of population shifts, and Notre Dame is getting ahead of that in a lot of different ways.
Right.
That's what you need to look at. This whole, well, the Big Ten is, but it's not about that. That's too shallow of a way of looking at this. If you're just looking at, well, Big Ten's a better football conference, so what? Notre Dame doesn't need the Big Ten. If they went to the ACC and dominated the ACC, guess what? They'd get in the college football playoff, just like Clemson did.
Right.
ACC sucked. Guess what?
Sure.
Clemson kept winning it, kept getting in the playoff, kept winning championships.
And from a recruiting standpoint, Notre Dame has a pretty good footing in most of the places that the Big Ten resides.
Correct.
They don't need help. They don't need to go to those schools and play those schools. They're fine in those areas, right? I mean,
are they going to beat Ohio State for kids because they play Ohio State? No, they're going to beat Ohio State for kids if they're good.
Right.
Are they going to play? Are they going to get kids from Michigan because they play Michigan? No, they're already getting kids from Michigan. Already getting kids from Illinois. They're getting kids from Indiana.
They're getting kids.
This helps them get kids from Georgia. This helps them get those Iowa kids. They're already getting those guys, right?
Right.
They're starting left tackles from Minnesota. They already got that guy. They're starting right tackles from Indiana. They're starting centers from Ohio. They're starting left guards from Wisconsin. They already got those guys. They're starting right guards from Michigan. They're already getting those guys, folks. Can you get down to the Carolinas? Can you get down to Virginia? Can you get down to Georgia? Can you get your foothold in those? And it's not just about football. These kids are watching, Georgia Tech plays Notre Dame's basketball team. Oh, they play the baseball team. Notre Dame is always around them now. And that has a big impact in recruiting. So it is so much bigger than that. And I just don't see the value in the Big Ten. I just don't, other than giving them money, I don't see the value in Notre Dame joining the Big Ten. They would be nothing. They'd be relegated to being a regional school. Here's the thing. Notre Dame will never get the status in the Big Ten that Michigan and Ohio State have ever.
Correct.
Same thing happened to Penn State. Penn State will never be Ohio State and Michigan.
They lost status by going from independent to the Big Ten.
I agree.
Yeah.
To me, when I look at Notre Dame, they can go to the ACC, and you are the big dog in the ACC. And with all due respect to Florida State, because you're the savior. We talked about this earlier, right? Yep. You're the team that saved the ACC. You're the big dog. You're the number one school that we're all building our schedules and our homecomings and our recruiting weekends around, right? That's not true in the Big Ten. So to me, there's no value to me in being in the Big Ten other than just they gave us the most money. Now, for Notre Dame, that may mean something. But for me, and if you're actually truly trying to build what's best for your sports programs, to me, there's a lot more value. Like if I'm Notre Dame and I'm in a situation where the ACC is about to die, and I see what's coming down the pike, and there's going to be a 2-conference thing, and we're going to be forced to join a conference, I would act now and jump into the ACC and try to save the ACC before I would just let it die and join the Big Ten.
Right.
Now, I don't think Notre Dame is going to do that. I don't think Notre Dame has enough faith that the ACC can survive. But I think that Notre Dame could be that institution that, somebody just said ACC is a sinking ship. It's not if Notre Dame joins it.
Right.
If Notre Dame joins the ACC, guys, it's a new TV deal.
Yep.
Florida State's not going anywhere.
They have to renegotiate the TV deal.
Clemson's not going anywhere.
Right.
That's just the fact. Because here's the thing. The way that they just set up that new, revenue thing, now all of a sudden they know Notre Dame's bringing us more money. We're flat out going to get more money now with the other different aspects because Notre Dame's coming to town. We already saw it. The ACC had their best year ever in revenue, TV revenue, the year that Notre Dame was in their conference.
Yep.
During COVID. So that's what I would do. The
problem is they don't ask our opinion.
No, they don't. It's just going to be about money.
I know.
It's the Big Ten's offering us $100 million. Okay, we're going to take it. And that's all it's going to be about. Sadly, whenever they do join a conference, it's going to be about money. And that's the sad part of the whole thing.
Right.
Is,
it's
start your own
in our lifetime. I'm sure. Yeah. I just don't want to think about it because they're in a good place right now as things lie, but things can change overnight. We've seen it.
Yeah.
So
there's some very short-sighted views of some of the takes I see on this are really like, that's just really shallow.
Yeah.
Like surface level stuff. Like let the ACC die and call your own shot. What if you let the ACC die? What shot do you have to call?
Right. Exactly. Because now you're at the whim of another conference.
Right.
Trying to get in.
What's your shot? Or stay independent. Well, you're already going to plan on doing that. But the fear that Notre Dame fans have is that, the Big 12 is going to die or, so what's your shot on joining the Big 10, going to join the SEC, the Big 12? What's the shot that you're calling now? You can't go start your own conference. You're not going to get a bunch of teams to leave their current pay salaries to go to a new conference. Where's the money going to come from?
Right.
That's the whole point of this whole thing. ESPN wants the ACC to die because they don't have to pay them the money because they don't have it anymore because of what they've already promised the ACC, plus what they've already promised the SEC. They're a dying business. They don't want to have to pay the ACC. So what's the shot you're going to call if you let the ACC die? It makes no sense. None. So some of these takes on the ACC are very, I'd say misguided. How about that?
Yeah.
Now, I think Notre Dame is going to let the ACC die. And I think that's a very short-sighted view, in my opinion, because you're going to find yourself left with you only have two options, Big Ten or SEC. Unfortunately, I think there's too many people at Notre Dame that are perfectly fine joining the Big Ten.
Well, because
that's the problem.
That's because they don't
care about the past.
Right.
They care about what's the size of the check you're going to give us for joining the conference.
Right.
That's what they care about. Is what it is.
Yep. So, we'll just see how it goes.
That's going to
That's going to do it for this edition of the Daily Mailbag here on Irish Breakdown Podcast. Make sure, folks, that you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share with your family and friends, give us a 5-star review, write a little something in there, let us know how we're doing. Always appreciate that. And join the boards, folks, boards.irishbreakdown.com. We are ever so close to getting to our goal of our preseason number. And we want you guys on there. We want you to be a part of it. So come on down, folks. Come on down. Get on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. And while you're there, get some merch. Get some merch so we can see you and give you a little hidey-ho neighbor when we're walking around campus. That's what we want. So
Vince loves that. Vince loves when people with IB stuff come up to him at games.
I love it, man. I love it. So for Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time because it's Friday. Friday free-for-all mailbag. We'll talk to you next time.
You and I's last show together for a little bit, right?
It is, at least in the afternoon. And at least in the afternoon, that's for sure. Oh, also, tune in tonight. IB Nation Sports Talk. Make sure you tune in tonight, 6 o'clock. But from now, it's Brian. I'm Vince. We'll talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.